Welcome back to another God of High School video, guys. We're going to be covering the second part of God of High School's final season in this one, aka the World Tournament arc. So with that out of the way, let's dive right into it. So our story starts with a couple of God of High School tournament participants getting into it head on. One of these unnamed scrubs channels his borrowed power, Cyclops, and causes all the other contestants in the arena to freeze in place. Well, that is except for one, Mori, because he's busy practicing his Taekwondo basics with his eyes closed. The other contestants notice what he's doing and just awkwardly go about their business. On the other hand, another tournament participant, a white-haired young man holding a book, approaches Mori and commends him for sticking to his guns instead of getting swept up by this whole borrowed power craze that swept the world. The guy shakes Mori's hand and continues chatting it up with our boy, telling him how martial arts used to be as lauded as their borrowed power counterparts in his father's generation. Meanwhile, Mori starts wondering exactly how many contestants are participating in the tournament. By his count, there are about 2,000 to 3,000 of them here, and they're all probably borrowed power users. Mori asks himself if he'd even be able to win in a fight against them now that he's lost his power when, all of a sudden, another guy bumps into him. Mori apologizes, but the dude just ignores our guy. On the other hand, this swole participant continues going his way. As the executive assigned to him, a scrawny man simply called number 205, acts like a total jerk to him, telling the dude to hurry up. In response, the guy finds it weird how Mori didn't fall down when they bumped into each other. As he puts it, that was the first time that it happened. But number 205 is resolute in being a wet towel, so he just keeps telling the buff dude to keep it moving. Mori witnesses how rude number 205 is to the guy, and his white-haired friend starts sprinkling in some exposition, namely that number 205 is just an insufferable jerk because he thinks the dude he's in charge of has no chance of winning the God of High School tournament. The reason behind that is because the guy isn't a borrowed power user. He's a bona fide martial artist. The white-haired dude tells Mori his name is Ivan Denisovich, and he's the only martial artist in this year's God of High School tournament. On top of that, Ivan is rumored to be the pupil of Dusa Kim, a former member of the Six. All of a sudden, some random contestant falls to the ground just right behind Mori and the white-haired dude. They then turn to see another young man with purple hair seemingly apologizing to the random contestant for getting in his way, which is why he got his butt kicked just now. Another executive known as X approaches. And if you were wondering, X is actually the one and only Kyoichi from Team Japan. We find out that X is assigned to watch over this purple-haired kid, whose name is Jin. Now X knows what's up, that Jin's kind of a bully, so he tosses the kid a penalty chip, which pretty much works like a yellow card in football. That is to say, if X catches Jin getting up into more dumb extracurriculars during the tournament, he's going to be expelled. Jin tries to get saucy with X and asks him what if he doesn't want to leave, to which X replies by telling the boy to just try him and see what happens. Jin is put in his place and walks away. On the other hand, Mori's new friend tells him to watch out for Jin because the kid is a real sadistic dirtbag. White-haired boy goes on to rant about the good old days, telling Mori how the God of High School tournament has basically become an advertisement for borrowed power users. In fact, white-haired boy's exposition dump sheds light into just how lopsided the rules of the God of High School tournament have become. For one, every attack or technique is legal as long as you use borrowed power to execute them. But targeting pressure points, shots to the back of the head, or biting your opponent is illegal. So yeah, you can pretty much burn people alive in this tournament as long as you use borrowed power. But don't even think for a second that you can perform a proper 12-6 elbow to the back of your opponent's head. White-hair boy continues chatting it up with Mori and tells him how he thinks this whole deal with Q replacing Kim in the Six might be a scam. For one, the rules of their match haven't been revealed. And as he puts it, Kim has historically dunked on Q, giving the former member of the Six a landslide record against his matchups with Q. So it's super weird that the man didn't even ask for a rematch when Q put up an upset against him in their recent bout. All this makes the white-haired boy think there's a conspiracy behind this, one that's aimed at discrediting martial arts in favor of borrowed power. Mori finally gets a word in, and he uses it to praise his new friend. But their conversation is interrupted when an MC announces that the orientation for the God of High School tournament is about to begin. Mori asks the white-haired dude his name, and we find out it's Jose Natasha Violeta Alexanders. Sound familiar? That's because he happens to be one of Alexandros' kids. You know, the guy who represented Team Macedonia before the time skip. Shortly after, the contestants gather in the middle of the venue and listen to the announcer's briefing about the tournament's details. It's going to take place in groups, and all participants will be receiving electronic bracelets and a healing nanomachine vaccine after this orientation. The announcer cuts to the chase and says that's all for the explanation before giving out the order for all the participants to throw hands at one another. The entire venue is then terraformed to separate the contestants by groups, each with their own raised arena surrounded by a force field. As if by destiny, Mori and Jose find themselves in the same group, which means they're going to have to face each other during this orientation battle. On the other hand, the announcer continues yammering about the rules of the game in spite of the fact that he just told everyone to fight immediately. The long and short of it is that this is going to be a free-for-all contest where the last man standing in each group is rewarded with the opportunity to advance to the God of High School Tournament Finals. The announcer finally finishes explaining things and tells everyone they can now tussle. Jin wastes no time to assault a random participant, while Ivan puts another random kid to sleep with a nasty overhand left. Curiously, Ivan notices his shoulder cramping up and realizes it was the same shoulder that bumped into Mori earlier. While this is happening, the tournament's executives oversee the bout from the venue's control room. Here we see classic characters like X, or Kyoichi, O, and V, aka Peach. Plus, we also see several new faces, like executives R, U, E, and F. We then find out that Mori, Jose, Jin, and Ivan all belong in the same group of this contest called Group F. Things heat up in this contest as Jose channels his borrowed power, Philippos too. Meanwhile, Executive O has his eyes glued to Mori. On the other hand, Mori only has one thing in mind: to keep up his ruse and prevent everyone else from discovering his real identity as the original Jin Mori. But he fails in spectacular fashion when he accidentally runs through all his opponents in Group F with a single martial arts strike. We then get a montage showing us how Jose, Jin, and Ivan are legitimate threats, but all this is shown just to highlight how easily Mori flatlines them in the present. Seeing Mori effortlessly become Group F's winner has all the other contestants wondering what's going on. After all, their scanners show that this so-called Mori Dan's power is only at level 1. Meanwhile, one of the executives watching the contest notices that Mori has just summoned his borrowed power, Arden. Now remember guys, Mori can't actually use Arden's borrowed power. This is all just a ruse that he, Dewi, and Peach came up with in order to keep up appearances during the God of High School tournament and prevent anyone from finding out that Mori is actually the Monkey King. In any case, all the other contestants see Arden and nearly wet their pants when they realize Mori is apparently no ordinary borrowed powered user. All of a sudden, everyone's favorite freckled rat-faced Argentinian, Samuel Rosinante, arrives at the venue. Samuel's actually an executive going by the name Q these days, and right now he's just brought a participant from Estonia to the tournament. The rest of the contestants, on the other hand, are absolutely confused why they're allowing this new arrival to participate, because they fail to understand that the God of High School tournament's rules really make no sense in the first place. That is to say, they're just making stuff up as they go along. Meanwhile, Mori turns to see this new contestant from Estonia, whose name is Kadri, a guy wearing a straitjacket and a mask. All of a sudden, a portal opens in the venue and transports all the random contestants from Group Z to the other side. Q then reveals that the tournament committee has given him and Kadri special treatment. The Estonian can participate in this free-for-all. The announcer tells everyone from Group Z to stop thinking too hard about the rules and just fight. They comply but are immediately eliminated when they attempt to gang up on Kadri, who beats the hell out of his attackers without removing his straitjacket. When more contestants go after him, Kadri literally turns them rock hard and frozen in place with the help of his own borrowed power, Gorgon. On the sidelines, Q comments that even he doesn't know the true extent of Kadri's borrowed power. Kadri then proceeds to shatter the other contestants he just petrified, but Q steps in and reminds him that murder is against the tournament rules. All of a sudden, Mori magically appears in the middle of the arena to move the plot. Of course, everyone is absolutely puzzled with what the heck is happening in this bonkers contest. It doesn't help that a hologram of Mujin suddenly appears in the middle of the arena and pulls a new rule out of thin air, telling Mori and Kadri to beat each other's head in. Whoever wins advances to the finals. So Mori and Kadri size each other up. Mori notices Kadri's actually getting off from all this violence, while he giggles like an insane school kid. And then they finally get down to business as the two contestants clash. Kadri manages to turn Mori to stone, but our hero is able to sneak in a devastating high kick that sends his opponent flying before he fully petrifies. This ultimately cancels out Kadri's technique, and Mori wins their duel in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, we can easily recognize that Mori's not even trying to stick to their original plan of keeping his identity secret anymore, as he stares down the camera knowing that Mujin is watching him from somewhere. Mori even grits his teeth and tells himself he's going to get his revenge against the president of the world. On the sidelines of the arena, Hugh and another executive, Kay, watch all of this unfold. A flashback from not too long ago shows Ilpyo presiding over a meeting at the World Government Office, where he's about to present his business proposal. Ilpyo starts by explaining how the other three superpowers of the world, Dewi's Nox, Mira's Neonox, and Sujin's Baohei, actually have shallow rosters that only contain anywhere from 2 to 3 franchise stars that could be considered as legitimate threats. Aside from those top performers, each of their organizations only have nameless scrubs on their payroll. Ilpyo goes on to say that Mujin's world government edges out its rivals in this regard, given that their organization already has 4 A-listers. Namely, there's Mujin himself, Executive O, Ilpyo, and Executive Q. Just to be clear, the Executive Q that Ilpyo is referring to here is the original one, not Samuel. Ilpyo continues to say that the world government also has a deeper roster compared to their enemies, given that they have squads of executives that serve more or less as trusty role players within the world government. But that's not enough for Ilpyo. He wants the world government to be the inarguable big market team he imagines it to be, an organization that not one of their rivals can hope to stand up to. So to do this, Ilpyo makes a pitch to expand their executive program and personally train them in hopes of adding more quality talent to their roster. Ilpyo also plans on restructuring the executive program so that each team will have a specific position to fill in the organization. We then discover that Ilpyo is explaining this to a single audience member, the executive who works directly for the world president and leader of Team Latin, simply known as One, aka The One. Now, The One is not too happy to hear that Ilpyo is going to be pretty much taking his job from him to become the unimaginatively named The New One, so he tries to start some static with Ilpyo. Ilpyo doesn't mind, and the two square up to each other. The One is immediately put in his place when Ilpyo nearly jams his throat with a well-placed kick before the Taekyon master pulls back. In fact, Ilpyo humbles The One so much that the guy ends up becoming an instant fan and starts making fan fiction inside his head about what it would look like if Ilpyo and Dewi went into a duel with each other. In the end, The One literally bends the knee to Ilpyo, and he assumes leadership of Team Latin and all the other executives as the New One. In the present, Mori and Peach have a meeting inside the God of High School Tournament Arena's bathroom. Peach is understandably livid about all the crap that Mori has displayed during the orientation free-for-all. She lectures him about how his stupid, thoughtless performance during the event put not just Mori at risk of being hounded down by the world government, like Dewi, Shiaochen, and the others. Mori finally understands the gravity of the situation when Peach reminds him that he's never going to get that nano machine treatment for Ahan if he continues showboating in the tournament. Peach then makes Mori promise to stick to their plan moving forward before excusing herself out of the bathroom for fear that the world government might get suspicious of them. Before she leaves though, Mori explains his side of the story. The long and short of it is that he got carried away because he's a high schooler, and he lost his temper after seeing Mujin pop out of nowhere. Mori's explanation makes Peach wonder if Mori still hasn't shown the full extent of his abilities. Somewhere else, inside Mujin's throne room, the man starts to realize that Mori Dan might actually be the original Jin Mori. As usual, it's up to Executive P to do something useful, as she proposes to have Mujin use Wi-Fi to sync all of the borrowed powers inside the God of High School Tournament Arena in order to find out if Mori's borrowed power Arden is actually real. Back inside the restroom, Mori gets even more frustrated when he remembers Mujin. Later, the God of High School Tournament Finals are about to begin, as participants gather at the stadium's designated waiting room to wait for the event to start. Mori's just minding his own business when a purple-haired little person suddenly approaches, and this girl has no respect for personal space. The girl fawns over Mori to the point that it makes her guy uncomfortable before she dashes off. She then heads over to Q's location and starts throwing shade at the Rat Tooth executive. Q gets annoyed, and we find out that this little person isn't just some random annoying fangirl. She's actually another executive called D, whose real name is Lee Hack the Tailor. D remarks that Mori's more ripped than the executives before running away again to supposedly make a suit. The God of High School Tournament Finals eventually kick off, as K welcomes everyone to the event. There's a lot of fanfare going on, with a healthy amount of retreading, as K pretty much gives us another history lesson about what happened after the Great War. We already know this, so we won't dive into it. What's of value though is when K explains a few key elements in this tournament during his long-winded exposition. One, there's the bracelets that were handed out to the tournament's participants, which show various information, such as your opponent's level, HP and MP, and various information related to the match. Then there's the nano machine that the organizers straight up injected in the participants, which supposedly guarantees their safety during the tournament. In addition, K informs everyone that these nano machines will be discharged from the participant's body within 6 months. And with that, K announces the beginning of the tournament, only to carry on his exposition dump, this time explaining that the God of High School Tournament Finals is actually divided into 3 events. There's the first stage, which is a league battle that's meant to narrow down the participants who obtain the highest score in several battles. Then there's the middle stage, which K calls Battle World, a survival game where participants form teams and companions to survive on a certain map. Here the organizers will narrow down the participants in the finals based on their scores. On top of that, there will be special events such as a consolation match and a battle with executives during this stage. Lastly, there's the tournament finals, which K says is an armed battle where participants are given the option to choose national treasures provided by the world government to hack or bludgeon their opponents with. Players also have the option of refusing this offer or using any weapon of their choice. However, nearly all of the participants are shocked when they hear that the national treasure used by the final winner is quote-unquote presented to the participant who chooses to claim the offer. Kei then tells the audience that only quarterfinalists can be promoted to the role of executive and claim the nano treatment perk that comes with it. Kei finally stops yapping and the first stage of the God of High School Tournament Finals starts. A match between a borrowed power user named Yuri and Kei serves as the opening bout of the event. These two scrubs have a heated battle, as Yuri uses his borrowed power called Lightning God, but he ultimately bites the dust when Kei straight up sets him on fire. Meanwhile, Mori sits in the stands with Peach, who's currently disguised as Executive V. Peach is taken by surprise when Mori correctly analyzes the mechanics behind Kei's borrowed power called Nymph, which is basically the ability to control temperatures. Peach asks Mori how Kei is able to activate his borrowed power, and our dude tells her he's not really sure. What he does know is that Mori's aware he can beat Kei. That's because he's going to be his next opponent. Their battle starts shortly after, and Mori proves that he's kind of a fight genius when he correctly figures out that Kei is able to activate his borrowed power based on the sounds his target makes. So Mori comes up with the brilliant plan of creating white noise all around the battlefield by scattering debris within the arena. Kei gets cheeky and attempts to set Mori on fire, but our hero gives his opponent a classic three-piece before sending him flying with a single punch. Mori wins, but he's not too happy. That's because he knows he messed up again by beating this scrub with one hit, putting him and his friends in danger of blowing his cover once more. Rightfully so, because Peach takes note of this and almost gives Mori another scolding after the match. But she backpedals when Mori apologizes and tells her he really did try to use even less of his strength on Kei. Still, it's not an excuse for him to ruin their grand plan, so Peach ends up giving our hero a short but stern lecture. Later, an executive called 11, aka Scholar, talks to the participant he's tasked to watch over. The participant looks forward to his bout with Jin, given that he thinks he can unleash his full power on the guy like a true shonen character. We soon find out that this participant is a guy named Ulf Sylvester, the brown bear slaughterer. As the name suggests, his main hobby primarily involves beefing with bears, which always ends with an animal rights violation. Ulf steps up to Mori and starts showboating by bending a coin with his fingers. Plus, he tells our hero the full details of his borrowed power, Midas, which turns parts of Ulf's target's body into gold when they sustain a certain amount of damage. To Ulf's credit, he's aware how exceedingly stupid it is when people tell their opponents the tricks in their bag, so he clarifies that the only reason he's revealing all this to Mori is because he's sure he's going to beat him. Well, Ulf's got swagger, if nothing else. So much so that he tells the referee to call an ambulance for Mori when he opens their clash with a punch to our hero's face. But Ulf instantly realizes he's about to get murked when he notices that all his punch did was break his own wrist. On the other hand, Mori remembers he has to act like a scrub to maintain his cover, so he pretends to get hurt by Ulf's punch. Ulf takes this as an invitation to hit Mori again, but our hero quickly dispatches him with a seemingly lightning-quick single smack to Ulf's face. On the stands, an executive called 24 and his assigned participant, Muhammad, revealed that Mori actually treated Ulf to a 7-hit combo just now. It was just too fast for the ordinary person to see. Regardless, 24 thinks that Muhammad can easily defeat Mori, given that his borrowed power, Uzat, aka the Eye of Horus, is Natak's natural weakness. Nope, because Muhammad's head instantly turns into a pinball the moment the bell rings. Mori goes on to win each and every succeeding match after that, and even gets used to playing to his opponent's level along the way. Hey, Mori even starts to enjoy the challenge of lowering himself to these punks. And by the time he's finished dealing with his latest opponent, both Mori and Peach are able to celebrate how he's mastered the art of making it look like your opponents even had a chance. Meanwhile, Dewi and Shiaochen have their eyes peeled for what's going on with Mori at the God of High School Tournament. Shiaochen wonders how much of a hard time Mori is having to keep up their ruse. In reply, Dewi drops some wisdom bombs on us and pretty much tells Shiaochen that what Mori's doing is as difficult as a person smacking a mosquito with their hands without killing it. As Dewi puts it, Mori only used to rely on his pure strength alone, so having to fine-tune his own power to make it appear like his opponents could actually beat him is an extremely difficult exercise. On the other hand, it's also what makes Mori's participation in the tournament meaningful, as it allows him to further harness his ability to control his own strength. We then discovered that Dewi and Nox have the real Executive V hostage within their domain. Right now, V has fallen asleep in his cell, and one of Dewi's people begins the preparation to dive into the man's consciousness to gather more information about the world government. It's revealed that Dewi and Shiaochen are actually right in front of the God of High School Tournament stadium, as he tells his partner that they're about to begin their counterattack. Shiaochen gets all deluded and begins to think that she and Dewi are now in a relationship. Our story then flashes back to several months ago, where we get a glimpse of just how exactly Dewi's faction was able to corner the original Executive V and ultimately turn him into their hostage. As it turns out, it took the combined effort of Shiaochen and a couple of Nox disciples named Jacob, along with Peach, who was still a disciple at that time, to trap V. Jacob did most of the heavy lifting for this mission, and it was all thanks to his ability to create containment tubes that eventually led to V's capture. In the present, Mujin and P consult with one of the scientists involved with Project Wi-Fi to see if they can use the device to decipher whether Mori really possesses Arden's borrowed power. Too bad though, because the scientist tells the world president that Project Wi-Fi systems are still down, and it'd take another 3 months before it becomes operational again. On the other hand, the scientist does give them a bit of good news when he informs the two that the world government has managed to gather a large amount of valuable data from Mujin's recent battle with the Jade Emperor, Dewi. On top of that, they're using this information to formulate an algorithm that would help Mujin bring down Dewi in the future. Aside from that, the world government's researchers are also currently upgrading the operating system of Adam, which the scientist refers to as the greatest existing quantum artificial intelligence so that it can join Mujin's battle next time. The president of the world has no complaints about all of this, especially when he hears these upgrades are going to give him a 99.99% chance of victory. The meeting ends when P proposes to Mujin to go into hiding for the time being. Meanwhile, at the God of High School Tournament Stadium's participant waiting room, Jose approaches Mori to chat it up with his new friend. Jose unloads his feelings about getting defeated with a single hit. The long and short of it is that he's thankful he met Mori, because this has given him a renewed sense of motivation to keep getting stronger. Their nice little chat is cut short though, when another contestant walks up to Jose. This guy's name is Isaac, and he's the representative from Kosovo. Isaac talks smack at Jose, mocking him for getting his butt kicked in the orientation battle. And we find out that these two young men have actually been rivals in the past. Later, we find out that Isaac's actually Mori's next scheduled opponent in the tournament's first stage. By this point, Mori has pretty much mastered the art of pretending his opponents can defeat him, so he allows Isaac to get a few good licks in before putting the guy's lights out. Isaac regains consciousness to find himself laid flat on the floor, and he soon realizes that Mori just flatlined him with a single punch to the face. Mori is announced the winner, and we find out that he's won enough matches in the first stage of the tournament to be able to advance to Battle World, aka the second stage. Mori and Peach are walking back to the waiting area when they come across another contestant on his way to the arena. Mori's interest is piqued, so he asks V if they could watch the upcoming bout. Shortly after, Mori and Peach witness the match between the guy they cross paths with, who turns out to be the representative from Ireland named Dean, and his opponent, a French representative called Baran. It's a tight match, but Peach thinks Baran has the upper hand. In reply, Mori tells her how he's noticed that there are actually a couple types of borrowed power users in this tournament. On one hand, there are those players who have immensely strong borrowed powers but have ridiculously poor fighting skills. On the other hand, there are those contestants like Dean who might not have the best kind of borrowed power, but they're able to make the most of it. In the middle of the arena, Dean rushes Baran and straight up tells him how he's able to decipher the conditions to activate his opponent's borrowed power. But Baran is able to beat Dean to the punch when he uses his borrowed power to suffocate by trapping his head inside a water bubble. Baran then tries to dial things up by attempting to crush Dean's entire body to death, but the kid is able to focus up and use his fighting instincts to close the distance between himself and Baran. Dean then cocks his leg back to unleash a powerful high kick aimed directly at Baran's face, but the attack doesn't connect when Dean passes out from suffocation before he can land a strike. Baran is declared the winner by technical knockout, but Mori can't shake off the feeling that there's something interesting about Dean's borrowed power. That's not all, because Mori also surmises that Dean hasn't even used a tenth of his true strength during his bout with Baran. Later, Kei takes to the stage to announce the beginning of the God of High School Tournament Finals second stage, Battle World. Obviously, those who are able to win their respective matches in the first stage are allowed entry into this part of the competition, while the losers can pack up and go home. Kei then explains the details about Battle World, and God of High School doesn't hide the fact that they cribbed this game based on popular video games like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and Fortnite. Much like those video games, the game involves players obtaining various items, forming alliances with other contestants, and slaughtering their enemies. It's a battle royale where the last 20 people alive receive tickets to the finals. Shortly after, players are sent to Battle World's waiting area in preparation for the event. Kei notices that the contestants have chosen to use this opportunity to try and eliminate one another instead of forming alliances for the upcoming game. Tempers start to simmer in the waiting area, but everyone soon folds when Mori arrives and everyone gets scared of him. On the other hand, Mori is surprised when Dean suddenly jumps in front of him and asks for a hero's autograph. Mori and Dean then get to know each other, and we find out that Dean actually won his next few battles after taking an L at the hands of Baran, which ultimately allowed him to become eligible to proceed to the Battle World stage. The two become fast friends when they start sharing martial arts advice with each other. Unknown to Mori, world government scientists are keeping a close eye on him from their lab. The announcer soon declares that the game is about to begin, so the two boys go their own ways. Before leaving though, Mori becomes all the more impressed and interested in Dean when he finds out that the boy isn't a classically trained martial artist. Instead, he's just been copying Mori's moves this whole time when he first saw him participate in the tournament. Simply put, Dean is using his own version of Ray Taekwondo. The game begins soon after that, and players are airdropped to the battlefield. Mori is the last to jump off the plane, which allows all the other contestants to get a beat on him. So they come up with a plan to ambush Mori en masse, thinking this would allow them to remove the biggest threat from the playing field. However, this fails when Mori's parachute gets ripped apart by wind pressure due to Yoi's weight, which, if you remember, Mori has been keeping inside his ear this whole time. So Mori freefalls toward the battlefield and crashes into a nearby hill. The impact from his crash landing causes a huge explosion that engulfs Battleworld in a sandstorm. Not only that, but the resulting chaos eliminates scores upon scores of random participants in the process. Now Mori emerges from the crash site a bit worse for wear, but he's still more than capable of making it toward the intersection of Battleworld. Meanwhile, we see that the game is now in full swing, as the other remaining contestants try to line shoot their way to victory. A couple of random dudes even have this scam going on where they lure other contestants to a specific spot before shooting them in the head with a sniper rifle. These two strangers think they can win the game this way, but what they fail to notice is that another contestant is gearing up to take them out. Somewhere else, Mori steps into one of Battleworld's many abandoned buildings where he finds the seemingly lifeless body of another contestant. Along the way, Mori is able to acquire a first aid kit, but what our hero really needs right now is some food. Mori checks his bracelet and confirms that the contestant in front of him is dead. He wonders if he should move the body, which makes Mori fail to notice someone sneaking up behind him. Our hero turns his head to find out that this shady dude happens to be Dean. So they start catching up with each other, and Dean even helps Mori put some bandages on his wounds. Afterwards, Dean has a seizure when Mori asks him to team up. Of course, the boy accepts and they formally introduce themselves to each other. Dean's just about to tell Mori what his borrowed power is when our hero cuts him off to inform the boy that he's already deciphered it. Specifically, Dean's borrowed power allows him to see about 5 to 6 seconds into the future. Oh, and Mori was able to find out about this after putting 2 and 2 together during Dean's match against Baran. Afterwards, the two boys check on the dead guy in front of them when it suddenly groans. Dean suddenly grabs Mori from behind and pulls him down as he reveals that there's a sniper in the area. We then get a thankfully short explanation about the weapons used in this game, which turn out to be newly developed world government firearms that can do damage to borrowed power users. But there's more pressing business to attend to, so Dean and Mori come up with a plan to take out the sniper outside the building. To do this, Mori uses himself as bait to locate the sniper's position. Our hero gets some help from Dean and his foresight ability to know where the sniper's next shot is coming from. Dean is able to relay this information to Mori, but our hero appears to still get shot in the head. On the bright side, this allows Dean to get the drop on the sniper and immediately take him out with a kick. He then rushes towards Mori and finds out that he was able to catch the bullet with his hand before it could lodge itself inside his head. On the other hand, Mori realizes that Mujin is planning something big, given that he's given the green light to develop weapons specifically designed to mow down borrowed power users. In fact, Mori starts to get concerned about the prospect of these firearms making it to market. A flashback then reveals that it was Mori who convinced Dean to use his foresight ability to deal with the sniper. In the present, Mori and Dean celebrate their win, but they're immediately interrupted when a single random contestant ambushes them. Not only that, but this guy turns out to be a walking poison bomb. The guy detonates himself in hopes of taking out Mori and Dean. However, Mori grabs his friend and whisks him as far away as possible when he notices one of their opponents detonating a poison cloud. The duo manage to get away from the poison cloud's blast radius, as Mori covers Dean's mouth to prevent him from inhaling the toxin. They soon land, and Mori is able to confirm that Dean hasn't been infected with the toxin. He can't say the same for himself though, as Mori soon collapses to the ground not long after checking up on Dean. Dean is forced to carry Mori to cover. He starts to run out of time when his bracelet informs him that the Battleworld's map is about to shrink. The rule goes that whoever's left outside the safe zone whenever the map shrinks would continuously lose their HP until they ultimately get taken out. Mori hears this and urges Dean to leave him, but Dean is one loyal friend, so he chooses to stay by Mori's side. He eventually finds some cover, but more trouble comes to the duo when a group of players led by a dude named Fanimer arrives. Even worse, Dean immediately learns that his former opponent, Baran, has aligned himself with Fanimer's gang. And if that's not bad enough, Dean suddenly has a vision of the future where he sees himself falling in battle. Dean clenches his teeth and runs away from Fanimer and his crew. Fanimer thinks Dan has tucked tail and retreated, and his gang prepares to deal with Mori. However, they're taken by surprise when Dean suddenly ambushes the group and proceeds to lay them out with pure martial arts. Fanimer tries to mount a counterattack against the boy, but it doesn't work too. That's because we learn that Dean's skill has grown in between meeting Mori and the present. In fact, a flashback reveals that Mori even coached Dean earlier about how he could make the most out of his borrowed power. Namely, Mori planted the idea in Dean's mind that he could use his foresight ability to cover both his offensive and defensive game, effectively turning Dean into a powerful counter-puncher. It pays off too, as Dean uses this approach to take down Fanimer's crew until he's the only one left. All the while, Mori can't help but be impressed with Dean's magnificent martial arts display. So much so that Mori thinks that Dean is the first person he actually wants to share the secrets of Ray Taekwondo with. However, Dean's hot streak ends when Fanimer sneaks up and stabs our guy in the shoulder. Dean is forced to gain some distance, as he and Mori witness Fanimer summon his own borrowed power. And it's one that the Monkey King is all too familiar with, as Mori finds out that Fanima possesses the borrowed power of the traitorous winged god, Garuda. While this is all happening, we find out that Dewi and Shiaochen have proceeded to infiltrate the God of High School Tournament Stadium. They're currently traversing the venue's inner basement, all the while talking about Mori. Shiaochen has a feeling that Mori's going to end up as the tournament champ, but Dewi isn't so sure about that. As he puts it, Mori has a lot of hurdles to get through, such as adjusting to his new weaker form as Dan. In addition, Dewi states that the other quote-unquote Mori-jin candidates in the tournament would prove to be difficult challenges for Mori to overcome. However, Dewi eats his words as soon as Shiaochen receives a message from Peach telling her that Mori has basically taken out all of these so-called Mori-jin candidates that Dewi was just talking about. Dewi gets embarrassed for his wrong predictions, but he doesn't hide the fact that he's so happy with how Mori always exceeds his expectations. Back on Battle World, Mori tries to get back on his feet, as we learn that the recent hit he took has left him paralyzed. Our hero starts to get all mopey for being too weak to prevent this from happening, but he immediately snaps out of it when he reminds himself of Ahan. However, Mori gets so desperate that he's now willing to summon Yoi, which would then absolutely blow his cover. He's made up his mind though, so Mori tells Dean to run away from their enemy as far as possible. That's because Mori knows Dean can't handle a borrowed power like Garuda in his condition. Mori then gives out an exposition about his relationship with Garuda, and if you're not familiar with God of High School's lore, Garuda used to be one of the Monkey King's sworn brothers along with Uma. In the end though, Garuda screwed them over, which led to the Monkey King and Uma's banishment from the Heavenly Realm. Meanwhile, Mori continues to urge Dean to retreat. At the same time, world government agents receive a strange signal coming from Mori's location, which leads them to believe that a national treasure level weapon is being activated in the middle of Battle World. In turn, Mujin uses this opportunity to cross-reference the signals they're receiving with the energy signature of the gigantic Yoi pillar in the middle of the ocean in order to confirm if the Monkey King is actually Mori Dan. Somewhere else, a skirmish between world government forces and Balhae erupts. We learn that Balhae has managed to get hold of several anti-borrowed power user firearms and have started using these things to mow down their enemies. Agents of the world government are almost pinned down trying to weather the hail of bullets coming their way. As a matter of fact, they would have been completely routed if not for the efforts of Executive O, who summons his pet dragon Changsik to burn the rebels alive and take the survivors into custody when the dust settles. After the battle, Changsik transforms into her hot, half-human form and approaches O. O notices that Changsik is acting weird, and the red dragon reveals that she's gotten a bad feeling after sensing Garuda's presence, given that Garuda has historically murdered her fellow dragons in the past. Back on Battle World, Fanima channels Garuda's spirit once more and prepares to attack Mori and Dean. But he's interrupted when a few random contestants jump him. These same unnamed scrubs happen to be the same people on Fanimer's crew earlier. But now these random contestants have decided to end their partnership with Fanimer, choosing instead to ambush him so that they can remove the guy from the competition. The gang of worthless scrubs then try to barrage Fanimer with their respective borrowed powers, but the dude easily slices them up with Garuda's abilities. With the distractions done away with, Fanimer turns back to Dean, who realizes that he really has to make a retreat. It also doesn't help when Dean reveals that he has seen the future, and it's one where he ends up defeated at the hands of this powerful opponent. However, for some reason, Dean starts to feel energized, and as he puts it, it somehow feels like he can beat this guy in spite of the overwhelming odds. Soon after, the Battle World map shrinks again, but Mori and Dean don't have time to worry about this, because Fanima is gearing up for a showdown with our two heroes. This hooded intruder talks smack, of course, as he attempts to get to Mori first. But Dean blocks his path and the two guys get into a good old-fashioned duel. Dean opens up the clash with a solid left overhand that rocks Fanimer before barraging him with unanswered strikes. Meanwhile, Fanimer can only recoil from all the hits he took and wonders if Dean has always been this strong, or if he's getting much more powerful with every second that passes. Regardless, he gets his butt handed to him until he finds an opening that allows him to grab Dean by the neck. On the other hand, Dean's not too worried about this. In fact, he notices that he's now able to use his borrowed power more efficiently than before, which allows him to come up with counterattacks and focus on defense at the same time. Dean eventually frees himself from Fanimer's grasp only to see that this opponent has disappeared in front of him and has proceeded to Mori's location. Dean realizes that he's been duped, because it turns out that one of Fanimer's tricks is actually the ability to create hallucinations. That is to say, Dean has been fighting with an illusion right from the start. To make matters worse, his opponent is able to sneak in a projectile from behind, which grazes Dean's eye in the process. Seeing this triggers Mori's trauma, as it reminds him of the time Dewi lost an eye to Okwang. Meanwhile, Fanimer thrashes Dean around and sends him flying into a nearby pillar. Mori then pretty much calls Fanimer's tactics cheap, while the villain attempts to give Dean a mental breakdown by showing the kid disturbing images of himself. And just to be sure Dean stays down, Fanimer creates more hypnotic constructs bearing Dean's face and sends them to go after him. He then prepares to take out Mori while his clones deal with Dean. Fanimer is just about ready to deliver Mori the killing blow when he notices that Dean has managed to defeat each and every one of his clones. In fact, Dean appreciates the dastardly villain for giving him a tough challenge like the one he just overcame. And with that, Dean walks his way toward their enemy for another clash, while Mori tells the hooded guy to take a good look because it's not every day that you get to meet a legit fighter like Dean. Dean charges at Fanimer and kicks him so hard in the face that his hood falls off to reveal that he's actually a pretty boy. On the other hand, Mori realizes that Fanimer is actually one of the rumored powerful contestants who has joined this year's God of High School tournament. Not only that, but Mori recognizes Fanimer to be a part of the NMA, aka the National Mages Association, a group of magicians used to be led by the late Jason. Our hero asks Fanimer about this, which causes him to lash out and go on a long-winded monologue about how he aims to carve his own legacy instead of following Jason's footsteps. Fanimer then proceeds to barrage Dean with magic, and things get so bad that Dean gets another vision of the future where he witnesses his own death. Meanwhile, a flashback shows the first time that Garuda met Uma and the Monkey King. In the middle of Battle World, though, Fanimer continues to assault Dean with magical spells until our boy eventually sheds literal tears of blood. On the other hand, this whole display allows Mujin and the world government to become aware that a god might be present in the middle of Battle World. Unknown to the world president, Dewi and Shiaochen have already spotted them, as the duo keeps tabs on Mujin while they hide inside the building's vents. Back on Battle World, Fanimer gets ready to take out Dean when he takes a bullet straight to his arrogant temple. His health points instantly fall to zero as Fanimer falls dead on the ground, and we find out that a couple of unnamed scrubs have just sniped him from some distance away. However, Dean is shocked when he sees Fanimer suddenly get back on his feet, while his HP replenishes. It's revealed that Garuda has just brought Fanimer back from the dead with a super convenient skill called MP = HP change. Fully revived, Fanimer wastes no time to teleport to the sniper's location only to be met by an entire squad of gun-toting random players who start spraying him with bullets. Meanwhile, Dean picks up Mori to get to safety, but Mori insists Dean to leave him behind. But Dean is one solid dude and he hates owing people, so he refuses to listen to Mori. At the same time, Fanimer takes out the entire squad of random players before summoning a gigantic ball of energy to just wreck the whole place and finish this stupid game. His technique is called NMA Jason type ultimate skill, Shooting Star, which culminates with Fanimer dropping down a rain of boulders all over Battle World. The technique manages to kill tons of unnamed scrubs participating in the contest. On the other hand, Dean does his best to get himself and Mori to cover. At the same time, Mori becomes even more curious about Dean when he notices that he's able to carry him over his shoulder in spite of the fact that he has Yoi hidden inside his ear. However, Dean's legs ultimately buckle from the weight and he collapses. Back inside the world government facility, one of Mujin's underlings tells him that the signal they just detected is coming from Fanimer's Shooting Star ability. Still, this doesn't do anything to ease Mujin's mind, as he gets all paranoid and wonders if the citizens of the Heavenly Realm have broken the pact they made with humanity and have decided to infiltrate their world. Back on Battle World, Mori opens his eyes to see that Dean has managed to rescue him from being crushed by one of Fanimer's megaliths. The bad news is that Dean's legs got pinned down in the process, severely injuring the poor kid. But Dean proves he's a solid friend when he reassures Mori that he's just happy he was able to save him. Fanimer then ruins the moment when he walks up to Mori and steps on Dean's head in the process. As you'd expect, the arrogant pretty boy continues to mock Dean while he gets ready to take them both out. However, Dean is not the type of guy to quit. He grabs Fanimer by the leg, which makes the magician ask why he keeps on defending Mori. In response, Dean makes it clear that this isn't about friendship. He just really wants to beat the crap out of Fanimer. Fanimer meets this statement with an insulting laugh, which distracts him long enough for Mori to skip over to Dean's position and help his friend out. And although Mori still hasn't recovered his full strength, he's able to lift the boulder off Dean before squaring up against Fanimer. Fanimer then tries to get the jump on Mori by summoning a gigantic meteor behind our hero. But Mori hits him with a front kick that's so powerful that it not only effectively cancels out Fanimer's technique, but it also manages to literally break the laws of physics itself. Dean sees this and can't believe how Mori's seemingly simple attack is able to distort the space around them. Well, that's because Mori has just busted out a classic technique of his own, and it's one we've seen him use in times past, the Jin Taijin original Renewal Recoilless Kick. Fanimer gets knocked out, of course, so Mori proceeds to carry Dean to get themselves within the safe zone of the ever-shrinking map. But they're not completely out of the proverbial woods just yet, as a laser-like projectile nearly hits Dean right in the head. Mori's able to deflect this with one of his kids, and he turns to confirm his own suspicion that Fanimer has managed to come back to life once more with Garuda's MP = HP change skill. Fanimer then appears in front of our two heroes, which makes Dean worried that Mori might be too gassed out to continue fighting their enemy. However, his concerns are put aside instantly when Mori easily rushes Fanimur when the magician tries to hit him with another projectile. This time, Mori gives him a taste of recoilless renewal ×2, which is basically a double serving of the same technique Fanimur ate earlier. On the other hand, Fanimur is able to survive this powerful move by activating his time slow ability, which forms a barrier that slows down any incoming attacks headed his way. Still, this isn't enough to stop Mori from beating his head in, as our hero continues to smash Fanimur's barrier with his bare legs. In fact, Fanimur starts to get worried that Mori will burst through his defenses sooner than later, so he decides to try and finish off our hero with his compression spell. However, all this does is reduce Mori's HP by a measly 7 points, not to mention that this whole duel has given him a much needed warm-up that ultimately loosens up our hero's muscles. This allows Mori to bust out another renewal taekwondo kick that sends Fanimur crashing into the side of a nearby building. The structure topples over, and Fanimur is forced to focus his time slow ability on it, which leaves him open for Mori's attack. But our hero chooses instead to savor this moment, as he straight up invites Fanimur to try and hit him with his compression skill now. Mori even promises he won't put his guard up. It's a free shot. And just to further humble his opponent, Mori starts talking about Jisanjon and how Fanimur can't even hold a candle to the late magician's abilities, especially since he's an arrogant jerk. All this talk about Jisanjon makes Fanimur lash out, and we get a flashback to the dude's origins. The long and short of it is that Fanimur grew up within the anime as their golden boy, the child who would one day become the archmage of their organization. This ended up putting so much pressure on Fanimur that he grew up hating Jisan, the anime, and even his own magical abilities. In the present, Mori notices that Fanimur's body can't handle Garuda anymore, as the winged god threatens to literally absorb his host. In the process, Garuda's spirit emerges and Mori takes this opportunity to apologize to him for being mean to him back when Mori was still the Monkey King. We then find out that Garuda has just been waiting for Mori to apologize to him all this time. That's because his spirit doesn't just disappear after our hero makes amends with him, but Garuda chooses to fully screw over Fanimur by removing all his borrowed power from the guy. This then causes the God of High School tournament organizers to hunt down and arrest Fanimur, since he's not a borrowed power user anymore. In any case, Fanimur goes nuts as a bunch of drones take him to custody. In the aftermath, Mori goes back to Dean to check up on him and reassure the kid that everything's good. Mori notices a large group of random scrubs surrounding them for an ambush, but these unnamed losers make the right choice and decide to lay off Mori and Dean. Because, they're well aware that Mori can easily put them to an early grave if they make a move against them. The story's narration reveals that each and every player in Battle World that Mori and Dean sang the same tune shortly after, until the game clock eventually ran out. In the end, the announcer declares the end of the second stage, and we find out that Mori and Dean obtain the highest score in the game. A quick flashback shows that Dean was able to realize the true essence of martial arts before he lost his consciousness in the aftermath of their scuffle with Fanimur. In the present, Mujin receives a report from one of his lackeys concerning the signals they receive from Mori cross-referenced with the giant Yoi pillar. Dewi and Shiaochen continue to stalk the world president from the vents while this is happening. Shiaochen wants to get down there and begin their assault, but Dewi tells her to stand down. That's because Dewi knows that the Mujin they're looking at right now is just one of the original Mujin's many dummies scattered around the whole stadium. On the other hand, Dewi informs his right-hand woman that he's figured out the location of the lab. We then get a mercifully brief exposition about the status quo of God of High School's world concerning the relationship between borrowed power users and non-borrowed power users. As the narrator says, non-borrowed power users were naturally neglected by the rest of society after borrowed power became mainstream. The narrator goes on to tell us that non-borrowed power users were pushed outside the bounds of society's various norms, regulations, welfare, and laws. Things got so bad that people started calling them the discharged, like a battery that has no use anymore. Long story short, the gap in discrimination between non-borrowed power users and those who possess this gift eventually worsened. So ordinary people have basically become second-class citizens. Meanwhile, somewhere in the east, Mandoc holds one of his nutty neo-Nox sermons deep within their lair, which the Council of the NHA, the National Homeless Association, don't really appreciate. Afterwards, members of the NHA report about current events going on in the world at large to Mandoc. One of them, a guy called G, approaches Mandoc after the meeting to express his frustrations about Mandoc and neo-Nox basically turning the NHA into a cult. Mandoc replies by pretty much telling G that he's more than welcome to excuse himself from his crazy sermons if he's not happy about it. Their meeting ends with G storming off when he realizes there's no changing Mandoc's mind about returning the NHA to its original state. He leaves, and we find out that Mira's kid is also in the same room. We hear the kid speak in full sentences for the first time when he tells Mandoc to shut his mouth and stop trying to get chummy with him. The kid walks out, and Mandoc decides to go on another meeting he has on the schedule. Back at the God of High School tournament stadium, Mori meets up with Peach, who informs him that he was actually dosed by a powerful neural paralysis drug called MF640 during the Battle World game. The only reason he was able to move his body then was because, he's Mori. Peach then gives our hero an update on Fanimur. And it's nothing we don't know already. The guy has gone postal, giggling like an absolute maniac ever since he lost his borrowed power and got arrested by the world government. Mori and Peach then pay Dean a visit at the stadium's medical ward, who informs him that he got a dose of that nano treatment, so he's going to be up and running again in a couple of days. Other patients in the ward spot Mori, and he's basically become a celebrity around these parts. Later, Mori and Dean head to the rooftop where Dean apologizes for putting Mori's life in danger because of his injuries during the Battle World game. But Mori makes it clear that everything's cool. After all, he felt like he owed Dean one after the kid protected him halfway through the match. So they're even now. Dean tells Mori his origin story, where we find out that he used to be a terminally ill kid around 12 years ago. It was also during this period that the world government first introduced the nano machine treatment to the world. Unfortunately, it was only available to people who were either direct descendants of national heroes or world government executives. At some point, an executive took pity on Dean, so they made arrangements to turn himself into Dean's grandfather. This allowed Dean to get the nano machine treatment he needed. In the present, Dean informs Mori that this same executive, his godfather, has become bedridden after suffering wounds during the Civil War. So Dean is here participating in the God of High School tournament to repay the kindness his godfather showed him. Dean's long-winded monologue all leads to him thanking Mori for being teammates during the Battle World game. On the other hand, the boy also declares that he's going to try his best to win the tournament even if it means they'd have to face each other in the finals. Mori accepts the challenge, and the two shake hands like a couple of gentlemen. Back inside his lair, Mujin receives a report that there is a thunderstorm that has just hit the Western Front. Security footage shows it might have been caused by Jung, who is seen walking towards the city's boundary. A flashback from not too long ago shows that Mandok's next meeting was actually with Jung. Mandok tries to call him Mori Jin, but Jung has become an edgelord now and insists everyone call him Mori Jung, because names don't mean much anymore. Back at the stadium, Mori checks on a computer and keys in the word national on Naver. We then go to another flashback, this time from 12 years ago. The nanomachine treatment was first introduced at the time in a grand event that involved a few terminally ill kids who were going to be the pioneering recipients of this supposed miracle treatment. This whole ceremony involved both a nano treatment injection and a bit of magic from Mujin. These pioneering children would soon be known as the Miracle Boys, and after their treatment, not only did they become cured, but they went on to possess peak physical human conditioning. In the present, Mori finishes checking on the computer. As he walks along the corridors of the stadium, our hero remembers the last conversation he had with Dean, who expressed just how badly he wanted to win to help his godfather and prove that he's worthy of the man's legacy. All of a sudden, Mori comes across Peach with some exceedingly bad news. It's about Ahan, and she's not doing so well right now. Mori wastes no time to head over to the medical bay to check on his sister, where he finds the poor girl in the middle of her treatment. Mori's close friend, Yoon, arrives and drops Mori an absolute stinker of an update about Ahan, that her body has started to reject her treatment. In fact, things have gotten so bad that her doctor informed the poor girl to make arrangements and call her family. On a brighter note, Yoon does inform Mori that Ahan has not lost one bit of her willpower in the fight against her illness. Yoon wonders if Mori's going to enter Ahan's room, but our hero refuses. As he puts it, he might not be able to handle seeing his beloved sibling in this condition. Yoon respects the decision, and Mori leaves to prepare for the upcoming God of High School tournament finals. It doesn't take long before the festivities start. As usual, Kate introduces the event with a lot of fanfare. On the sidelines, Peach asks Mori how Ahan's doing, and our hero kind of brushes it off by telling her that she's doing well. Right now, all Mori has to focus on is doing his part. Mori is called to the middle of the arena for his first match in the finals, where he's matched up against a representative from China named Shuwen Li. Li runs his mouth like your typical antagonist, but he does it in a more or less respectful way, telling Mori how much of an honor it is to face him in this tournament. The bell rings and Li goes on the offensive, while Mori continues to keep up appearances and pretend that his opponent can beat him. Mori eats several unanswered strikes from Li, who eventually summons his borrowed power, Shang Yu, aka the King of Western Chu. Meanwhile, Mori subtly turns to Peach's direction and whispers something before cutting this bout short with another one of his patented recoilless kicks that hits Li straight on the chin. Li's knocked out, of course, and Mori's declared the winner without rousing any suspicions. However, Peach notices from the sidelines that Mori would have been busted if he hadn't given her the signal before kicking Li in the face. This makes her wonder if Mori's power is still growing as the tournament goes on. Mori steps out of the arena, while Q, otherwise known as Samuel, takes an interest in our hero. Shortly after, Mori spends his downtime meditating and reflecting about his current condition. He wonders if the reason behind the significant downgrade in his power levels was caused by Mujin's unsealing of the pact, or whether it's because he was using his Jibong Chim technique too much in the past. We get a much clearer idea of what our hero is going through in terms of his combat abilities when he creates this analogy about a car. Namely, Mori explains that his current Monkey King abilities can be compared to a super high-speed engine. while his physical form is more of a trashy old hoopty. Long story short, Mori has to continuously focus and make sure that he maintains control of his Monkey King powers, otherwise it might inevitably destroy his physical body. All this leads Mori to conclude that he's been too reliant on his natural abilities instead of harnessing his martial arts skills like Jin Tai-jin did. Our hero thinks his natural talent alone wouldn't be able to make him the tournament champ, so Mori decides to make sure that he can channel all the power his current physical form allows. Later, Ilpyo, who's now the current head of all the world government executives, walks the stadium's hallways with One. As we mentioned earlier, One has since started to become a fan of Ilpyo after the man totally dunked on him during their meeting. So he takes this opportunity to confirm certain details about the fan fiction he's making in his head, namely whether Ilpyo is stronger than Dewi. Ilpyo tells him that Dewi's undoubtedly more powerful than he is. According to him, Dewi might not be the perfect fighter, but he gets an edge over Ilpyo due to the powers he got from Okwang. But like a true fanboy, One is not having any of this. So he changes his question and asks Ilpyo what would happen if he and Dewi went at it in a one-on-one duel. Ilpyo doesn't answer, and One tries to gain more brownie points by telling him that he thinks Ilpyo could kick Dewi's butt if they tussled. Along the way, Ilpyo comes across Mori and the two manage to get a good look at each other. However, Mori realizes that Ilpyo probably doesn't recognize him, as he and One continue going their way. Unknown to Mori, Ilpyo has noticed that there's something in the way our hero walks. On the other hand, Mori is suddenly confronted by Q, who first apologizes before attacking Mori without provocation. Mori does his best to defend against Q, but the executive easily knocks him flat on his butt. Q then apologizes to Mori, telling him that he only did what he did to confirm something, and now he's sure that Mori's not the guy he suspects him to be. Q even throws in a bit of shade when he tells Mori that he's worse than him, referring to Mori Huey. Q starts walking away when Mori gets back on his feet and tells the executive he caught him by surprise just now. On the other hand, Q tries to de-escalate the situation by apologizing again, as he tells Mori how his fighting style reminded Q of another guy he fought in the past, the original Jin Mori. Mori uncharacteristically gets all aggressive when Q straight up tells him that Mori Huey is better than he is. Our hero tries to lunge at Q, and all he gets is a cracking rib shot in return. Luckily, we find out that Mori's friend Jose arrived just in the nick of time to stand between him and Q. The dude does them a solid by breaking up the fight before chastising both Mori and Q for getting into it with each other. On the other hand, Q can't help but be impressed that Jose was able to dodge his attack just now. Mori feels the same, thinking he would have definitely gotten flatlined if Jose didn't act as a human shield. Jose scolds Q for trying to start a fight with a contestant, while he gives Mori an earful for being dumb enough to tussle with a bona fide executive. Jose goes on to tell Mori how deadly Q's attack was, pointing to a hole in the wall on the far end of the hallway. In the end, Jose successfully stops the two from getting into a full-blown brawl and informs Q they'll be submitting a complaint to the God of High School Tournament Committee. Jose has every right to be frustrated with what's going on too, especially when we discover that he broke one of his arms trying to stop the fight. Cooler heads prevail in the end as Q approaches Mori and apologizes once again. Q picks up Mori, and our hero is super weirded out when he notices how Q is able to easily lift him off the ground in spite of the fact that he has Yoi hidden in his ear. Regardless, Q praises Mori for his performance all throughout the tournament before excusing himself. All the while, Mori finally remembers exactly who Q is. Before leaving, Q expresses how he was actually hoping that Mori was, well, the original Jin Mori, since he's been wondering what would happen now if they have a rematch. Shortly after, Q walks the stadium's hallways and still can't believe that Jose was able to dodge his powerful technique earlier. All of a sudden, his fellow executive, G, steps up to Q to scold him about the shenanigans he got into with Mori just now. G's obviously livid about all this and tells Q she'll report him to their superiors. On the other hand, Q starts to get cheeky and attempts to attack G. G immediately springs into action and counters his technique. On the other hand, Q tells her that he's just playing around, but G is not having any of it. The long and short of it is G tells Q to just go and test her patience if he really wants to die. G's just about to storm off when Q calls her over and explains why he just attacked her. In his own weird way, Q explains that he used the same technique on Mori earlier to determine whether he's just a kid who keeps winning because he doesn't understand the gap between himself and his opponents. In response, G gives Q an alternate explanation. What if Mori's actually just on the same level as a bona fide executive? Back to our hero, Jose gives him a stern talking to after all the drama that has just unfolded in the hallway. But their conversation is cut short when Jose's assigned executive drags him by the ear to send him to the upcoming consolation match. Mori, on the other hand, can't help but wonder how Jose was able to improve in such a short time, especially considering he knocked him out earlier with a single punch. Our hero calls out to his friend and asks him this, to which Jose simply says he trained his butt off and simply believed in himself after Mori defeated him in the orientation battle. Jose adds that he's noticed Mori has become rather sullen, telling his friend how much he preferred Mori back when he first saw him. Jose and the executive then head off to the arena, while Mori turns toward the hole in the wall caused by Q's attack. He inspects it and finds out that it was a more powerful technique than he initially thought. Because the attack didn't just blow a hole in the wall, it actually blew a series of holes through the entire stadium. This makes Mori realize that his friend Jose has truly stepped up his game since the last time they saw each other. So of course our hero wasn't going to let this opportunity to see him fight slip. Mori rushes to the arena only to find out he's too late. Jose has already beaten all of his opponents, and with a broken arm to boot, by the time Mori arrives. Jose spots Mori and tells him that he's happy that he won, but he still thinks he has a long way to go. Back at the medical bay, we find out that Dean has fully recovered from his wounds, as he gets ready to participate in the tournament finals. Meanwhile, the original Executive V has managed to escape his containment chamber and prepares to escape Nox's clutches. Back at the arena, Peach hears an announcement calling her to the operations center. Later, Mori's in his locker room doing some warm-ups. All the while, he wonders if Q's actually the strongest executive there is. Mori also remembers Jose's words about training hard and trusting ourselves completely, as our hero continues to harness his Rei Taekwondo basics. Meanwhile, inside the executive's office, we learn that G has snitched to Q and O, and he's now about to receive his sanction. O tells him how lucky he was that Mori didn't make too much of a fuss about the whole deal, otherwise Q's pay would have been docked for a year. More to the point, O tells his subordinate the details of his punishment, that he will be participating in the upcoming Fight and Executive God of High School event, which is basically an exhibition match between the top performer in the tournament and one of the world government's executives. Q doesn't want to do it, since he finds it demeaning. And it's here that we get more details about how the executive system works. You see, their one-letter initials are actually codenames that are passed on from one executive to the next, which explains how Samuel became the new Q after the original executive Q defeated Dusik Kim and went on to become a part of the Six. Traditionally, the title Q has played the role of an idiot among the executives. Long story short, Samuel has to be that idiot and participate in the exhibition match, but he gets a free pass when another executive called F, the so-called Sharper, steps in and volunteers to take Q's place instead. O agrees, while G gets excited and assigns herself the role of MC for the upcoming event. Later, G goes all in on her MC gig, as she cosplays as Diva and welcomes the spectators to the Fight and Executive exhibition match. She goes on a long-winded monologue about the details of this event, which is basically as straightforward as it gets. The top contestant in the tournament fights a world government executive that comes with a cash prize. One interesting little detail is when we find out that this whole exhibition match was established after the original Jin Mori got into it with the original Executive Q all the way back in God of High School's first season. Of course, the tournament contestant participating in this exhibition match is none other than Mori, who psychs himself up by following in Jose's footsteps and just believing in himself. The participants square up in the middle of the arena, and Mori comes face to face with F, who tells Mori how weird he is. It's not an insult though, because F really believes that you need to have that quality if you want to be a bona fide world government executive. Right before the start of the match, Mori senses that there's something overwhelming that students don't possess and executives do. There's no time to dwell on this though, as G announces the beginning of the bout, informing us that the only thing you need to do to win in this exhibition match is score a knockdown against your opponent. Proving how weird he is, Mori seemingly walks right in front of F's face and removes his glasses, since wearing them in a fight is inappropriate. This takes F by surprise, and the two combatants immediately get down to business afterwards. F rushes Mori, and a close-quarter clash ensues. Our hero goes for a high kick, but F dodges it and gets behind Mori before hitting him with a technique called Crook Slash. All bets are off, as F assaults Mori with a series of Godori-themed attacks, like Yellow Frog, SJW Punch, Autumn Iris, January Cranes, Deer and Fallen Leaves, Vine Cuckoo, and Peony. F's barrage is punctuated with a powerful move he calls Paulonia and Phoenix Bolt, which lands cleanly on his opponent. F's confident that his salvo is enough to earn him the victory, but Mori is able to prevent himself from getting knocked down with sheer willpower alone. It doesn't take long before Mori gets back on his feet and lunges at F with his own combo, starting with a high kick before peppering him with strikes to the face and body. Mori mixes things up with a low sweep called Renewal Ground Scrape, but F is able to evade this and counter with a technique called Sakura Wild Card. Mori catches on that this is a feint and attempts a roundhouse kick directed at F's face, but the executive is able to block this with a single finger. So Mori switches his stance to go for a hook kick instead. But again, F blocks it and even manages to grab him by the leg. In turn, Mori adjusts and follows up with Renewal Homegioli Pin to free himself from F's hold before busting out his trademark Renewal Recoilless Kick. This one lands square on F's jaw, even sending a powerful shockwave to the stands behind him. However, his recoilless kick isn't enough to score Mori a knockdown. Instead, F loses control of his wits and attempts to summon his national treasure, Rashomon, before lunging at Mori. G instantly notices what's happening within the split second that this occurs, and it culminates with a huge explosion in the middle of the arena. The dust settles, and we find out that G is actually really good at her job as both MC and referee when we find her standing right in front of F to stop her fellow executive from causing more destruction at the venue. G goes so far as to chastise F for losing control, telling him he must have lost his mind pulling out his national treasure on a student. F and G then turn towards Mori's direction to find out that once again, his pals Jose and Dean have jumped into the fray to prevent Mori from getting hit by F's attack. Dean is absolutely mortified, while Jose chastises F for straight up attempting to kill Mori in the supposed exhibition bout. In response, F admits how humiliating it is that he can't even beat a student, as he walks towards Mori's direction. G thinks F is about to start some more smoke, but F actually bows in front of Mori and concedes defeat. F walks away, while Mori surmises that F lost control because he felt threatened that his attack power exceeds F's own defense. Later, F loiters around the venue while wondering which of the 3 boys in the arena actually blocked his Rashomon technique earlier. In any case, he might not know who did it, but he's sure one of these kids is lying. A short flashback reveals the original Executive V knocking out Jacob, the Nox member responsible for keeping him inside a containment cube, before he looks for a phone that would help him reach out to the world government and get rescued. In the present, Peach, impersonating V, is called to a meeting with Mujin, who asks her about Mori. Their conversation is interrupted when Mujin receives word that he has a call coming from the original Executive V, which of course causes concern for Peach, given that she might get found out. Mujin gets suspicious of what's happening, so he tells his lackey to put the call through. While this is happening, Mori's at the stadium workshop wondering if he should avail of the National Treasure offer being handed out for the God of High School Tournament quarterfinals. He admits he really doesn't need one, but he's super tempted by the idea of flipping a National Treasure in the market should he win the game. Jose arrives, and Mori asks him if he's trying to decide which National Treasure to use during the upcoming event. Jose keeps which specific National Treasure he's going to be using before going on an exposition about what a National Treasure is, which are basically powerful weapons you can use in battle. To cut a long story short, Jose goes on to tell Mori about the most powerful National Treasure of all, power lenderization, which he describes as the ultimate weapon that turns the weapon used by God himself in myths into reality, rather than being made by a quote-unquote craftsman. As he puts it, power lenderization is valuable for its rarity since it's only passed down to so-called direct descendants, but it's unstoppable once it's used with a person's own weapon. Jose then gets to the real reason he came here, to ask Mori details about his upcoming opponent. But Mori refuses, since that wouldn't be fair. In any case, Jose is unable to plead his case to Mori when the announcer calls for our hero to come to the central control room. Meanwhile, Mujin's call with the original V is suddenly interrupted before it can even start. Mujin attributes it to a system error and goes back to addressing Peach, who he orders to watch over Mori. Peach leaves the room and finds a secluded spot somewhere in the stadium to take a breath. She's now super paranoid that Mujin probably knows she's an imposter. It also doesn't help when she wonders what exactly happened to her fellow Nox member Jacob. On the bright side, we do learn that Dewi's people have just managed to subdue the original V with a chair to the face. Still, they're worried about the current developments happening with this situation, so Jacob gives out the order to report all of this to Shiaochen. Somewhere else, Mori gives her sister Ahan a call, and promises her he'll be back as soon as he finishes participating in the God of High School tournament. Afterwards, Peach approaches him and they have a secret meeting on the rooftop. Peach expresses how anxious she is now that she thinks Mujin has his suspicions about her. It also doesn't help that her borrowed power skill, Narcissus Mirror, is needed to keep Mori's disguise active. The problem is, she's forced to shed off her V disguise whenever she uses this ability to help Mori. Peach also doesn't hide the fact that she's not too happy knowing that Shiaochen will probably prioritize Mori over her should crap hit the fan in their mission. However, Mori reassures Peach that she won't have to use her Narcissus Mirror technique from here on out. On top of that, our hero promises her that they won't get caught. Peach has a mercifully quick flashback showing her as a baby before her story goes back to the present and shows her offering Mori a fist bump. The two wish each other well and pretty much vow to stick together until their respective tasks are done. Back inside Mujin's lair, he gets paranoid about V. P reassures him that what happened was probably a glitch in their system, so he shouldn't be worried about it. Later, the God of High School Tournament Finals begins, and we learn that the first bout is going to be between a couple of characters we're already familiar with. It's Jose going up against Dean. Mori continues his usual solitary training when he starts to feel that something's off, but he brushes off eventually and continues with his work. Back at the arena, the announcer continues to hype up the crowd, while Jose and Dean make their respective preparations in their locker rooms. As you'd expect, the tournament announcer first goes on an exposition detailing the rules of the match, and it's nothing we haven't heard of already. Namely, it's a straight-up bout with the added twist of allowing the participants to use national treasures provided by the organizers or ones they've brought to the tournament. Meanwhile, Jose and Dean reflect on the respective reasons for joining the God of High School tournament. To Jose, this is a way for him to prove his strength. And, well, our guy finds the entire challenge fun. On the other hand, Dean is using this opportunity to see his own limits and show his own appreciation for getting a second lease in life after recovering from his grave illness back when he was just a kid. In any case, the match finally begins, as Jose and Dean square up in the middle of the ring. The signal is given, and Dean doesn't waste any time to start things off by hitting Jose with a well-placed high kick to the face. Dean capitalizes on this and continues to deliver a combo until Jose finds an opening and catches his fist mid-punch. Jose starts talking smack to Dean, telling him he knows that he's a beginner when it comes to martial arts before hitting the dude with a solid right straight. Jose then slips past Dean's guard and puts him in a tight rear naked choke. However, Dean is able to counter with a low sweep that helps him break free of Jose's hold. Dean exclaims how exciting this whole match is, and the two continue their clash, with Jose going for a nice level change before busting out a technique called Sarissa-style phalanx, a cracking uppercut that almost hits Dean square in the chin. However, Dean is able to use his borrowed power's foresight ability to block the punch, which allows Jose to decipher that Dean's fighting style focuses on counterattacks. Dean then summons his borrowed power, which is revealed to be the goddess of time, Verdandi. Jose answers this by summoning his own borrowed power, Philip II. Not only that, but Jose ups the ante by pulling out his power lenderization charged national treasure, Sarissa. Seeing this, all Dean can do is brace for impact. Everyone from Mori to Kyo are taken by surprise when Jose's next attack using Sarissa blows a hole in the stadium's roof. But wait, there's more, as this is immediately followed by even more of Jose's national treasure piercing through the stadium, causing the whole venue to nearly collapse. Somewhere else, Executive F suspects that Jose is the liar that he was referring to earlier. Meanwhile, Mori runs toward the arena to see that not even Executive K's powers were enough to block off Jose's previous salvo. What's more concerning though is when he spots Dean in the middle of the ring, as the boy sprays blood over the place after taking the full force of Jose's recent attack. Everyone in the stadium is slack-jawed after witnessing Jose demonstrate just how much of a problem he is in this tournament. The problem is, Jose might have been able to catch Dean with his technique cleanly, but the exertion from performing this feat has left him gassed out. So both he and Dean fall to the ground at nearly the same time, prompting the announcer to declare a double knockout. But the match isn't exactly over, because for some reason, double knockouts don't apply as a game-ending condition in this match. So the announcer waits for whoever gets to stand up first, presumably so that a winner can be declared. Well, that doesn't work either, because Dean and Jose stand up almost at the same time. Dean goes first and gets super hyped that he was able to survive Jose's powerful attack using Sarissa. On the other hand, Jose goes on a Hollywood-style flashback that ultimately motivated him to continue fighting. Here we see Jose during his youth as he cries to his dad, Alexandros, after a bunch of kids started calling him a bastard. It turns out that there's a rumor going on that Jose's real mom was Natasha, who used to be Alexandros' side piece back when she was alive. So Alexandros and Jose have a heart-to-heart talk where his dad explains that Natasha was the person who saved his life in the past. Long story short, he gave Jose the middle name Natasha to honor her and as a reminder to always be determined to overcome any challenge in his way. In the end, Alexandros gives the young Jose some motivation by telling him to go out there and experience the world. This allows Jose to muster all his remaining energy to get back on his feet in the present, now with an all-new, all-different perspective, that he might feel small, but that just makes the world worth conquering. From there, Jose channels a technique called Phalanx, Pesatire Syntagma times 100, which summons thousands upon thousands of spears behind him. Meanwhile, seeing this makes Dean more resolute in dodging Jose's attacks, since he knows he won't be able to withstand another powerful hit like earlier. So Dean focuses up and gets an ego boost, as he declares he's going to demolish Jose with his skills. Specifically, he's going to do something that he's really good at, imitation. Dean wastes no time to lunge at Jose and perform a series of superbly executed strikes that, if you can't tell already, he learned from watching Mori. Dean barrages Jose until he finds an opening, which allows the Macedonian to summon another national treasure he has under his sleeve. On the sidelines, F wonders if Jose has broken the rules of the game, given he has a couple of national treasures. However, Q explains that everything is on the up and up, because Jose's national treasure is made up of a 2-item set, the lance, Sarissa, and the shield called Hoplon. Witnessing all of this gets Q all excited, considering this year's God of High School tournament is made up of promising prospects. In the middle of the battlefield, Dean's foresight ability triggers the moment Jose summons his lance and shield national treasure set. But there's no quitting in our guy. This time, he knows it would take more than mere imitation to win against Jose. He's going to have to evolve his fighting style. So Dean gets up close to Jose and busts out a hook kick that manages to lock his opponent's arms. They find themselves at a stalemate, because although Dean has properly dealt with Hoplos, Jose still has his Sarissa spear barrage that he can launch towards Dean. But Dean proves he's a natural martial artist when he beats Jose to the punch with his own version of Mori's renewal Taekwondo, recoilless kick. In fact, Dean manages to copy this technique right down to the T that he successfully breaks the laws of physics within the space between himself and Jose. Mori sees this and can't believe his eyes, because in the middle of the battlefield, Dean has just knocked the living daylights out of Jose, causing his spear barrage to get obliterated in the process. Not only that, but Mori notices the spatial distortion Dean caused with this recoilless kick is even bigger than the one he made when he hit Fanimer with the same technique. All of a sudden, Mori notices all the other audience members staring at him, as everyone realizes that Dean pretty much ripped off the tricks Mori has used in the tournament, like renewal ground scrape and renewal homing Gioli pin. Not everything is peaches and cream, however, because everything that's happened up until now has allowed Mujin to believe that the first singularity since Ragnarok has occurred. So he tells the Atom AI to calculate the feasibility of the quote-unquote conclusion he just deducted. Meanwhile, Mori and the rest of the spectators at the arena feel concerned when they see Jose being wheeled out in a stretcher. Mori's taken aback when F suddenly appears behind him, telling our hero how interestingly strange Dean is. In fact, he's just as strange as Mori, since we learn that F actually broke his arm when he struck our hero during their exhibition match earlier. F walks away, and Mori shows his appreciation for the executive, informing the guy that he gave our hero a so-called hint when they faced each other. Before leaving though, F tells Mori that he looks forward to seeing Mori and Dean eventually face off against each other, albeit he knows that Dean has a better aptitude for fighting. Shortly after, Dean walks up to Mori, and the kid is excited as all hell for winning his bout against Jose. Dean tells our hero how the recoilless kick is taking a toll on his body, which prompts Mori to praise him for copying the technique after only seeing it once. However, we soon learn that Dean didn't just pull that trick out of nowhere. It turns out that he started practicing how to use the recoilless kick ever since he first saw Mori use it against Funimur. In fact, Dean got so caught up in his training that he managed to use his foresight ability as part of his regimen. All in all, Dean reveals that he probably practiced the recoilless kick technique 3 million times before he busted it out in the middle of the ring. Dean then tells Mori that he's happy that he has now managed to reach Mori's level before letting his friend know how excited he is to face him down the line. Dean excuses himself and bids Mori good luck in his next bout. Mori takes all of this in stride, and he's actually pretty happy for his friend. On the other hand, Peach thinks Dean is trying to play mind games with her hero, so she advises Mori to not pay attention to anything Dean just told him. But then, Mori reveals how he really feels about things. It's not that he now kinda hates Dean, it's just that he thinks people like Dean and Jose have easily surpassed him in such a short period of time. Ultimately though, Mori knows that Dean is actually the real deal. In other words, a martial arts phenom. While this is happening, we learn that Dewi and Shiaochen have sprung their plan to lay siege to the God of High School Tournament Stadium's lab and have successfully acquired a sample of the world government's nano treatment machine. However, Dewi still isn't ready to leave, because he just found out that they're going to need so-called permission from the world government system to be able to use the nano machine they got. Dewi tinkers with one of the lab's computers and grabs all the information they need before getting ready to leave. However, he and Shiaochen stop in their tracks when a lone figure suddenly appears before them. Later, Mori and Peach decide to bond over drinks in one of the stadium's stockrooms. Mori unloads his feelings about how he now feels pathetic and weak, especially when he thinks that he's probably weaker than a clone like Mori Huey. Peach proves she's a solid friend when she starts dropping truth bombs on Mori after listening to him rant. As she puts it, everyone just pretends to be mature as if everything's fine, but they're actually afraid. She goes on to praise Mori for always having his sister's back, which then prompts our hero to mope about how he feels bad for having to postpone reuniting with his best friends, Mira and Dewi, to help his sister. Peach drops more truth bombs and tells Mori it's only natural to feel that way. She even admits she's jealous of Ahan for having a good brother like Mori. Peach even goes so far as to commend Mori for having the maturity that even most adults don't have. As she puts it, the world judges people as adults or intellectuals based on their achievements. But once those achievements disappear, they become a bunch of groveling, pathetic worms who can't handle loss when it comes for them. Peach then advises Mori that she does understand why he's so mopey about not being in his prime anymore. After all, he used to tussle with literal gods, but now he's out here scrapping with students at the God of High School tournament like an amateur. But as Peach puts it, what's wrong with being a bit pathetic sometimes? After all, taking care of yourself was hard enough. It wouldn't kill you to feel like a bit of a loser. Peach's pep talk manages to lift Mori's spirits, and now it's Peach's turn to unload, as she tells Mori that she knows better than anyone what it feels like to be weak. According to her, she spent her whole life carrying that emotion. From there, Peach tells Mori her entire origin story, and it's kind of a tragic one, guys. We hope you're ready for another flashback, as our tale shifts to several years ago where we'd learn that Peach's dad used to be a successful businessman who was devoted to his religion and was pretty much well loved by everyone around him. But then, her dad spiraled when his business folded and eventually lost their house. Much like any other poor, desperate soul with nowhere else to go, Peach's dad turned to religion. Specifically, he joined Nox. This turned out to be a mess too, because Peach's dad eventually sided with Mandoc back when the cult experienced its own rift from within their organization. Things got so bad that other Nox members started targeting Peach after this. But a silver lining arrived when she met Shiaochen, who defended Peach from the rest of the creepy cultists and took her under her wing. In the present, Peach wraps up her story and we see that she's gotten absolutely sloshed from the drink she's had. But before calling it a night, she tells Mori one important piece of information. It comes in the form of a code word, Rafitaphora. According to her, this is the activation code that Mori has to use so that he could activate Peach's Narcissus' mirror ability even when she's not around, effectively allowing him to keep up his disguise. Mori starts to get concerned for Peach when he asks about the activation condition of Narcissus' mirror and learns that the condition is her life. Peach then falls asleep, and Mori tucks her in, promising Peach that he's not going to let her die. After all, everything's going according to their plan. All Mori has to do now is win the quarterfinals so that he can get the nanomachine treatment for Ahan. and then he'll just lose the next fight on purpose afterwards. The next day, Mori participates in his second match in the first round, where he faces off against an unnamed player with bandages all over his head. This guy has chosen a national treasure called Livatane, while Mori has selected a staff. The bout ends as you'd expect, with Mori knocking the heck out of his opponent. Mujin watches this from his room and notes how Mori has pretty much become a media darling throughout the tournament. P expresses her concerns about this, given that the reason Mori's become so popular is because of his combat style, which favors martial arts over borrowed power, something which P believes might become a threat in the future. But Mujin says it's alright, since this gives non-borrowed power users an escape from their miserable lives. In other words, Mori is a good figurehead for martial arts propaganda. Meanwhile, Mori notices that the national treasure he has chosen belongs to the late Yang So, the legendary member of the Six and former head of the NHA that fell during the Great War. Seeing this infuriates Mori, while Mujin continues to prattle on about how the world government can use Mori as a poster boy that would help him control the masses more efficiently. One of Mujin's lackeys then approaches with an update on a woman that they've been investigating, hinting at none other than Peach. Somewhere else, Dean continues to train and tells his assigned executive that he's going to give his all to try and defeat Mori. Meanwhile, Mori has just sold off Yang's old staff online, which has just netted him 450 million won. Mori's excitement from the sale is curbed when the announcer calls for him to go to the arena for his quarterfinals bout against Dean. Not too far away, Peach is about to make her way to the arena when numerous executives block her path. Mujin appears and Peach knows what's up, that she's been found out. It turns out that Mujin has used Executive D's ability to decipher Peach's true identity using the chair she sat on during Mori's bout against the bandaged random dude earlier. With her cover blown, Mujin asks Peach why she's here. On the other hand, Peach shows us that she's a legit soldier to the core when she pulls out a detonator from her pocket, a weapon she's been keeping for this very occasion. Peach is just about to press the button, which would allow her to take out Mujin and all the executives in the immediate vicinity at the cost of her own life. However, one of the other executives, Yu, jumps in and slices her arm off before she could detonate her explosive. With Peach cornered, all she can do is worry about Mori. Our story then takes us to the north home base of Balhae, where Ilpyo springs his grand plan to ultimately pit the other world powers against one another to soften them up enough for the world government. Ilpyo has a meeting with Sujin, who tells her that he came here on behalf of the world government to offer an alliance with their faction. Ilpyo keeps things civil as possible, and he puts on his charms when he tries to entice Sujin to align Balhae with Mujin and the world government in exchange for lifting all the economic sanctions they placed on the region. That, plus the world government is willing to offer monetary incentives should Sujin accept his proposal. Of course, the other Balhae members present during this meeting instantly oppose the offer. On the other hand, Sujin keeps her cool and asks Ilpyo what else is on offer. She almost folds and gets duped into joining the world government when Ilpyo presents Sujin with her one and only weakness, a lifetime supply of large-sized McDonald's Mega Mac combos. Thankfully, one of Sujin's lieutenants, G, is right by her side to prevent her from doing something stupid. He berates Ilpyo for trying to pull one over on Sujin, so Ilpyo goes for another angle. As we learn, there's this disease called the X syndrome that has popped up in children born after the Great War. This deadly disease has no cure, but the world government's nanomachine treatment helps its victims cope with it. So, Ilpyo offers Sujin and Balhae top priority for the nanomachine treatment should she accept his offer. But Sujin's no dummy as far as things don't concern McDonald's Megamax. She's well aware that the nanomachine treatment is far from completion. As such, she knows that the world government would just give them useless, incomplete versions of the nano treatment, and then sell the completed version to them at exorbitant prices once it becomes available. So no, Sujin is not falling for this trick. And with that, Sujin dismisses Ilpyo, telling him to go back to Mujin and wag his tail by the man's side like the female dog that he is. On a more interesting note, we learned from Sujin that Ilpyo used to be one of Dewi's trusted allies before he screwed him over and took his talents to Mujin. Ilpyo tries to tease Sujin with his hamburgers one last time, but her mind's made up. Plus, she makes it known that Balhae wants one thing and one thing alone, Mujin's head. Ilpyo then excuses himself and leaves. G follows him and asks what Ilpyo personally wants to achieve from all this, to which he replies that he wants to take over the world. All of a sudden, an overzealous Balhae member jumps in front of Ilpyo and tries to assassinate him. Back in the city, the tournament quarterfinals are about to begin, and it opens with all the fanfare and pageantry you'd expect, with scores upon scores of people cheering for Mori. We learn that Mori's newfound popularity has granted the world government's economy a boost, as more and more people have started patronizing various industries to emulate Mori. Inside the stadium, Mori and Dean are already inside the ring waiting for the announcer to start their bout. A world government agent then approaches Mori and presents him with a disturbing artifact, Peach's severed hand. Seeing it makes Mori's mind run 1,000 miles per hour, as he starts worrying about Peach and gets paranoid wondering if the world government has caught up to their plan. Aside from the hand, the agent also relays a message from Mujin telling Mori to have a great match against Dean. Obviously still reeling from the shock, Mori walks toward the center of the ring to square up against Dean, who notices that there's something weighing heavy on his friend's mind. The announcer, Kay, tries to cut the chit-chat between the two. On the other hand, this prompts Mori to ask Kay if he was there when the world government chopped off Peach's hand. Kay neither denies nor confirms this. Instead, he just manages to make Mori even more furious when he tells him that Peach was no executive, she was a simple traitor. At this point, even Dean realizes things are about to get rough from here on out. Back in his inner sanctum, P asks Mujin why they won't just capture Mori before he escapes the world government's clutches. But Mujin is a smart weasel if nothing else. For one, seeing him fight Dean would allow Mujin to confirm if Mori could really use borrowed power. On top of that, the world president knows how useful it would be to keep Mori by his side, since it would make controlling non-borrowed power users' sentiments easier for him. We then return to the middle of the ring, where Kay finally rings the bell. Mori gets that distinct look on his face, the same one Dewi had told Peach in the past that gave them a clue whenever Mori got pissed off. And right now, Mori has no time to get into a drawn-out battle with Dean, so he tries to eliminate his friend from competition with a single hit of his renewal Arang skill. Dean takes it right in the gut, while Mori nearly obliterates him when our hero unleashes a devastating ability called Recoilless Renewal, which sends Dean flying to the opposite end of the stadium. Meanwhile, we get some relatively good news and learn that Peach is still alive. She's currently being held hostage inside Mujin's room. Back in the arena, we get to see the whole sequence leading up to Mori's use of his Recoilless Renewal technique from Dean's perspective. Here we learn that Dean was able to jump backwards at the last second, just before he got hit with Mori's devastating strike. This allowed Dean to lessen the impact of Recoilless Renewal, and we find that he's still conscious after being thrown to the far end of the stadium. As a matter of fact, Dean's surprised when he learns that Mori conveniently accounted for his trajectory to make sure that none of the spectators got harmed. Dean spots Mori walking away from the ring, which prompts the boy to try and get back on his feet. However, Dean suddenly realizes that his legs have given out. Back inside his throne room, Mujin calls the fight in favor of Mori, but he's still waiting for our hero to show him if he can really use borrowed power without Peach's help. Surprisingly enough, an image of Arden appears right behind Mori, and Executive D confirms that Peach didn't activate her abilities while inside the room. On the other hand, we next learn that Peach actually cast her borrowed power on Mori in advance just for this very situation. Mujin is well aware that all the facts point out that Mori Dan isn't actually Mori Jin. However, Mujin has a gut feeling that's not the case. Back in the arena, Dean finally gets back on his feet and starts acting like a stereotypical shonen protagonist when he tells himself he has to use quote-unquote that. His posturing is interrupted when a world government executive called I blocks his path, telling Dean that the organizers are stopping the fight. Dean uncharacteristically acts like a meathead and swats away the agent's arm, which results in I satisfyingly breaking the boy's arm to subdue him. World government agents start to swarm the stadium, and before he knows it, a bunch of executives have circled Mori. Our hero spots Peach when Mujin brings her with him to the middle of the ring, while the mere sight of the world president instantly ignites Mori's rage. Somewhere else, we find out that Dewi and Shiaochen have come face to face with a couple of other executives, Double One and Seven. Seven tries to talk smack at Dewi, who doesn't have the slightest idea who she is. Out of nowhere, Seven opens up a portal and introduces Dewi to the person who will be his opponent today, Ilpyo. Ilpyo steps out of the portal, who tells his two lackeys that his recent mission to Balhae was a success. He then turns to Dewi and tries to act all chummy with the guy, but Dewi isn't one to deal with crap like this, so he answers Ilpyo's greeting by blasting him with his powers. Ilpyo dodges in time, but he still gets nicked on the cheek in the process. Still, Ilpyo tries to act civil with Dewi, but our guy isn't having any of it. And just to show he means business, Dewi takes off the bandage covering his right eye, aka the Sage's eye, all the while telling Ilpyo to shut his mouth because they were never friends in the first place. Ilpyo, on the other hand, tries to get back at Dewi with one of his flame attacks, but the Kyokushin karate master effortlessly dodges it. We then see that Ilpyo has activated his nine-tailed fox mode, as he and Dewi prepare for a good old-fashioned showdown. We then go to a flashback from 17 years ago where we see Dewi paying Ilpyo a visit inside his home, with the goal of convincing the Chiaikan master to join him in the fight against Mujin. Ilpyo wonders why Dewi needs his help, considering that he already possesses one of the most powerful weapons in the world, the Sage's Eye, which he inherited from Okwang. In reply, Dewi informs Ilpyo that sure, he can use the Sage's Eye to take out Mujin, but that would inevitably cause innumerable casualties, and Dewi doesn't want that on his conscience. On the other hand, Ilpyo asks him what he plans to do after giving Mujin what he's got coming to him. Dewi doesn't get a chance to answer, as Ilpyo starts going on a monologue about how Mujin was able to rebuild the world after the events of Ragnarok in spite of all the underhanded crap he did. And although Ilpyo does share the same sentiments as Dewi when it comes to punishing Mujin for his war crimes, he does admit that the world president did play a huge part in helping the world recover from the Great War. Regardless of what you think, Ilpyo does have a point when he tells Dewi that killing Mujin would lead the world to chaos. Ilpyo goes on to chastise Dewi for becoming the new leader of Nox, reminding him of all the evil things Okwang and his cult did while he was in power, which, when you think about it, is way worse than anything Mujin has done up to this point. In the end, Ilpyo gives Dewi an ultimatum: to gouge out the sage's eye from his head and take out all the Nox remnants himself. Then and only then will Ilpyo agree to help him get revenge against Mujin. Dewi, on the other hand, tells Ilpyo that his ultimate goal isn't just to kill the world president, it's to save someone he loves, referring to none other than Mira. Ilpyo hears this and understands where Dewi is coming from. In the end, the two men agree to disagree, but Dewi asks Ilpyo if he's just going to allow Mujin to act freely. Well, it turns out that Ilpyo has other ideas, and it's one that's as naive as it is daring. He tells Dewi that he plans on taking down Mujin the legal way by destroying him from within the system he's built. Simply put, Ilpyo's going with a classic beat the system from inside shtick. Now, Ilpyo knows that this option is the most inefficient and costly one, but as he puts it, it's also the most rational choice. Dewi listens to all this and surmises that he and Ilpyo might end up facing each other as enemies down the line. They mutually express their reluctance to fight each other, but the two men ultimately accept that it is what it is, as they end their meeting with a handshake. In the present, things heat up between Dewi and Ilpyo, while Shiaochen messes around with a celebratory selfie nearby. Dewi and Ilpyo's standoff is interrupted when all the executives in the room receive a message from their bracelets telling them to head over to the arena as soon as possible. Dewi tells Ilpyo he can go, but he prefers to tussle with Dewi. Meanwhile, Shiaochen approaches her boss and informs him that Peach's identity has been compromised. On the other hand, Seven informs Ilpyo that all the researchers inside the lab have been accounted for. Dewi and Ilpyo then get back to their duel. And after a bit of smack talk from both sides, Ilpyo resumes the clash by channeling a technique called Hyaki Yagyo. He fails to capitalize on it though, as Dewi uses a sage's eye to force Ilpyo to the ground before he can complete channeling his ability. In response, Ilpyo starts to play dirty by sending out his underlings to ambush Dewi. It doesn't work though, as Dewi once again uses his powers to send his attackers flying. From there, Ilpyo starts playing floor general, as he commands squads of random executives to assault Dewi. Again, this falls flat, as Dewi literally makes each one of them fall face first into the ground. Dewi starts to get annoyed with Ilpyo's tactics, but he reminds the Kyokushin karate master that this isn't some dumb schoolyard fight anymore, so he's going to do what he needs to be done to take down Dewi. Next, Ilpyo introduces a new squad of executives he calls Team Gilgamesh, agents who work directly under him. They get into formation and start barraging Dewi with long-range shots. To their credit, Dewi does start to feel some pressure from their salvo when he realizes they've added some really strong attacks in the mix. Ilpyo, on the other hand, makes the mistake of taunting Dewi, telling him to try and answer them with his own long-range attacks. This just allows Dewi to slip through his defenses and hit Ilpyo with his inertia force technique. Ilpyo manages to parry Dewi's attack, and they get into it at close quarters. All the while, Dewi tells Shiaochen to escape the lab with the nanomachine sample, and she complies. However, Double One and Seven catch up to Shiaochen before she can make it out the door. Shiaochen dashes Double One's face into the ground, but Seven manages to sneak up and stab her in the gut. Still, Shiaochen just eats this up and gets ready to deliver the smackdown on Seven. But her head is thrown back all of a sudden when she gets hit by another strike. Shiaochen turns her head to see that more members of Executive Team Latin have arrived inside the lab. Meanwhile, Dewi manhandles Ilpyo and easily pins him down by the neck. Ilpyo, on the other hand, knows that desperate times call for desperate measures, so he summons his pet to free himself from certain death, the sixth lord of the heavenly realm, Praltriller. A short flashback from earlier shows that Mujin has been refitted with a temporary, mass-produced arm while world government agents continue to craft a new one for him in their lab. On the other hand, his right-hand woman, P, has concerns with Mujin's insistence to personally get involved with this whole Mori debacle at the arena. But Bossman gets the final word, so he tells P he really has to see this for himself before asking if they've finished preparing the measures he's ordered. In the present, not even the combined forces of Team Latin are enough to stop Shiaochen when she's in battle mode. We see her pummeling anyone who tries to start some static with her, forcing another member of Team Latin, 2, to use his copy and paste ability to send more bodies Shiaochen's way. Team Latin's Executive 9 then gives these new soldiers a buff called the Beast, attack power and speed boost to give them a fighting chance against the swinging bishop. Back in the arena, Mujin greets Mori and calls him by his real name, Mori Jin. Not too far away, Dean is still being subdued by Executive I. Meanwhile, Mori spots Mujin's hostage, Peach, and easily recognizes that he and his forces did some awful things to this poor girl. Aside from chopping her hand off, Mori knows that they tortured her before bringing Peach here. While this is happening, Dean notices Mujin giving him a look, though he still has no idea what's going on in the middle of the ring. The executives then tell Mori that they have permission to execute him on the spot if he makes any sudden moves. Mujin makes his way to the center of the ring to face our hero, bringing Peach along with him. Mori instantly feels his blood boil the moment Mujin gets close to him, but our hero knows they've already done so much to let their mission fail now. So instead of taking a swing at the world president, Mori keeps up appearances to try and convince Mujin that he's not the real Jin Mori. After all, Mori knows how to keep things in perspective. As he puts it, now's not the time for revenge. He has to make sure Ahan gets her treatment first. Mujin then goes on a quick exposition on the Great War and how he made sure Jin Taijin was branded as a traitor to humanity. It's thankfully short, and he gets to the point that the real Jin Mori wouldn't have been able to beat his temper if he saw Mujin. But the world president's not done yet. He presents Peach to Mori and everyone in the arena, declaring her as an enemy of humanity for being a member of Nox. The spectators, being the sheep that they are, immediately call for Peach to be summarily executed right then and there. Peach becomes reserved to her fate, as she remembers the only person she thinks truly cared for her, Shiaochen. Meanwhile, Mujin gives her an ultimatum, to repent now and pay for her crimes against the world government in exchange for her life. Now, Peach explicitly tells herself she's ready to die today. In fact, she's been ready to die from the start. But you can't blame her for backpedaling and getting cold feet when she starts speaking, because instead of acting all tough and trying to be a hero, Peach suddenly notices that she's lost control of her own bodily functions, and now words are coming out of Peach's mouth against her own will. That's because Executive P has used her marionette ability on Peach, taking control of the poor girl to use her in preserving Mujin's propaganda. Meanwhile, Shiaochen is still busy dunking on the executives being thrown her way, but she's starting to feel like the tide of battle is tilting the other side, as her attackers have started to pinpoint her weak spots and set themselves upon her in a concerted manner. Back in the arena, P continues to control Peach, as the girl starts to plead her case so she doesn't get the death penalty. Peach is forced to tell everyone that she's a member of Nox, explaining that she'd been duped into joining that cult under the guise that it was the legitimate religion. Back in the lab, Seven manages to sneak past Shiaochen's defenses and impale her with a sword. All the while, P forces Peach to continue the lie, as the executive makes her craft this whole story about how Peach was forced to join Nox. She even goes so far as to discredit Nox, branding the organization as the traitors to humanity and the group responsible for kicking off the Great War all those years ago. Peach ends her plea, but it's not enough for the mob in the stands, who have started pelting her with trash and calling for her immediate execution. Mujin, on the other hand, takes this as an opportunity to further test Mori to see if he's really who he says he is. Simply put, he leaves the decision concerning Peach's fate in Mori's hands, whether they should spare Peach's life or just give her the death penalty. Mori then has a flashback after listening to Mujin. Here we find out the details about his recent phone conversation with Ahan, who told him that he has to stop letting her hold him back. That is to say, Ahan has given her big brother her blessing to fight for what he thinks is right. In the present, Mori decides to prioritize the mission and tells Mujin to give Peach the death penalty. He even denies knowing Peach at all so that the ruse becomes more effective. On the other hand, Peach herself is at peace with this decision, knowing full well that their mission comes first. Peach smiles and utters the secret activation code for her borrowed power, Raphidophora, while Mujin tells himself that he's now convinced the boy in front of him isn't the original Jin Mori. All of a sudden, Mujin raises his hand and in one fell swoop, chops off Peach's head. But it's just a narrative bluff, as we immediately learn that this is all a vision that Dean has used to help Mori see 5 seconds into the future and properly counter Mujin. In reality, Mori has teleported himself right in front of Mujin to prevent him from slicing off Peach's head. Peach is just as surprised that she's still alive, while Mujin threatens Mori with severe punishment for this affront. Mori nearly loses his cool and cocks back his fist to give Mujin a well-deserved punch to the face. The executives surround him, but they stop when everybody notices Mori pull back and punch himself in the face instead. Mujin then tries to get to the bottom of things, considering that Mori was the one who decided to give Peach the death penalty. Of course, the masses start acting like the sheep that they are and have now instantly turned against Mori. On the other hand, Mori clarifies that yes, he did say that Peach deserved the death penalty, but it has to be done in a humane way according to the proper procedures of the world government instead of putting her down like a dog in the middle of the arena. All the while, Mori is just relieved that Dean came in clutch and used his powers just in time to save Peach. In the stands, Dean believes that he and Mori are now even for doing each other a solid throughout the tournament. Executive I suspects he played a part in what just happened in the arena, but Dean feigns innocence. Meanwhile, Mujin tells Mori to step away from Peach or he'll execute him too. Not only that, but Mujin will brand our hero as the original Jin Mori if he doesn't do what he says. Mori refuses as he tells himself he's not going to let any more of his friends and family die. Oh, and all of this drama is being shown live on air, so everyone from Jose to the doctors in the stadium's medical bay knows what's going on. Ahan is even tuned into this, and she can't be any prouder of her brother right now. Back in the ring, Mori repeats that he's not Jin Mori, as he literally draws a line in the sand and tells everyone that he's not going to allow Peach to be executed unless it's in a humane way. We then learn that Shiaochen has managed to take out each and every one of Team Latin's members inside the lab. She hurries to the arena to let Mori know they have the nano machine, but the bishop suddenly spots a few more Team Latin stragglers chasing after her. In the arena, even Peach is puzzled with Mori's decision to defend her, but our hero insists that he's not going to let her die. One of the executives, the fun-sized Yu, gets froggy and starts peppering Mori with strikes. This diminutive jerk even talks smack but instantly regrets it when he notices that all his punches did was break his own hand. F gets in on the action and throws a bunch of playing cards at Mori. In turn, our hero stomps on the ground to prevent himself and Peach from being flanked by their attackers. This only grants Mori a short reprieve, as the executives continue to pile on him until they send our two heroes flying to the opposite end of the stadium. The executives can't believe that Mori is still standing after the barrage except Q, who tells his fellow world government agents to not hold back and just keep throwing everything they've got at Mori. Meanwhile, Mujin has convinced himself that Mori isn't the Monkey King, but he still can't believe our hero is determined to protect Peach. At the same time, Executive O tries to do some damage control, so he whispers something to Mujin. In turn, Mujin gives the order to shut off the God of High School Tournament broadcast, evacuate the spectators, and barricade the entire stadium. They then continue assaulting Mori afterwards. This time, a huge dude wearing a gas mask seemingly knocks the wind out of Mori with a powerful gut shot. But our hero still refuses to step aside, as he tells Peach that people like her are as precious to him as family. Peach, on the other hand, has had enough of seeing Mori get his butt kicked for her sake. Meanwhile, Shiaochen is almost at the door leading to the arena when O suddenly appears and blasts her with his red and half-dragon. Shiaochen is seemingly obliterated, as she apologizes to Dewi for not being able to keep her promise. In the arena, Mori finds himself slashed up when Kyoichi, aka Executive X, uses his national treasure on him. Peach's emotions come to a boil and she pleads with Mori to just let the world government kill her. But Mori's having none of it. He even tells her the same thing that Shiaochen once told Peach long ago, that this life may trample all over you, but it's still better than the afterlife. Another executive, R, sneaks in a cheap shot on Mori, which makes our hero lose a couple of his front teeth. The huge dude who hit him earlier takes off his gas mask to reveal that he's one ugly son of a gun named Executive Y. Y rants about how his brother died in the Great War and how he initially thought he and Mori were alike until they weren't. Long story short, he wants to kick Mori's butt now. From there, Q, X, and Y channel their borrowed powers, with X summoning Kusanagi no Tsurugi, Y summoning Behemoth, the god-slaying poison, and Q bringing forth Hercules to the battlefield. They then lunge at Mori at the same time for maximum effect, given that these three executives each have a national treasure in their hands. At this point, Peach finally gives Mori an answer, that she really doesn't want to die. On top of that, she tells Mori to keep on fighting too, and just as the executives' attack hits, a force bubble forms around Mori and Peach to protect them. They turn to see that Shiaochen has survived her encounter with O and has arrived in the arena with Heite. She tells Mori that they've acquired the nano machine. This means they can proceed with Plan A, as Shiaochen tells Mori that he can save Ahan, so Mori can operate as he likes from here on out. He doesn't have to keep up the ruse any longer. Hearing this, Mori turns to Peach and pretty much reassures her that Shiaochen's arrival is the stroke of good luck they've been waiting for. And now that he's been given the go signal, our hero doesn't have to pretend to be a borrowed power user anymore. P knows what's up, so she pleads with Mujin to get the heck out of the arena. But the world president is one stubborn dude, as he tells his sidekick to hold up because he really wants to watch what happens next. Dean and Executive I then notice that the entire stadium has been covered, leaving them only slits in the barricade to see what's going on in the middle of the ring. Meanwhile, Shiaochen checks up on Peach and expresses a relief that she's alive, while Heite gives her his patented good boy licks to instantly cure her injuries. Peach thanks Mori for standing up for her and gives our hero the green light to go kick some ass. Mori gives her a reassuring thumbs up, while Executive F, having no idea who's right in front of him, sees this and starts talking smack at our hero. At this point, even his fellow executives like Q and X have had enough of F's antics, so they tell him to shut his hole and stay focused. Unlike F, they know that the two warriors in front of them are more than enough to send each and every one of them to an early grave. Not only that, but the combined might of the Monkey King and Shiaochen, the so-called Saint of War, can start a second Great War at any second. Shiaochen then gives Mori the second parameter of their mission, one that Dewi himself has ordered, to grab Mujin's right arm, which happens to be the trigger they need to activate the nano treatment machine they've stolen. Even better, they don't have to be too precious with this mission, they can take it from Mujin dead or alive. All of a sudden, the pie-faced Executive Y tries to start the clash by assaulting Mori, so he gets his reward in the form of a well-placed kick to his ribs that undoubtedly mangles Y's innards. From a distance, the other executives can tell that Mori didn't just give Y a single serving of violence, he just ate up a 4-piece combo directed at his larynx, cervical spine, side, and knee. Witnessing this makes Executive X panic, so he calls for everyone to unleash their full power and gang up on Mori right this instant. The other executives comply, as they each summon the full force of their respective borrowed powers before setting themselves on our hero. In turn, Mori simply goes for a renewal basic stance and proceeds to bob and weave his way through their enemy's salvo. All the while, Mori knocks out the executives one by one with renewal taekwondo kicks. Executive U eventually catches on that all they have to do is subdue Mori's legs to stop him from attacking. But they soon learn a hard lesson when Mori suddenly busts out the other martial arts styles in his bag. Starting with a masterfully executed Kyokushin karate, Fist of the Black Turtle strike that sends a couple of executives flying. Our hero mixes stances again, this time going for Ilpyo's trademark Samsu Tekyon block and deflect technique before transitioning to Samsu Tekyon torrential strike to further mow down the enemy ranks. That's not all, as Mori then switches to a northern-style ITF Taekwondo, Bright Flamingo stance to pummel the executives. This whole clash culminates in the stadium spotlights crashing right into the middle of the arena. Its impact causes a convenient smokescreen for Mori, who uses it to ambush any world government agents he can find. Not too far away, Peach realizes that Mori is just using the same moves he's been using all throughout the competition. However, she realizes that the only reason Mori looked like an amateur before was because he was doing his best to make sure he doesn't put too much stress on Peach's borrowed power while in the competition. And now that he doesn't need to keep up with that, Mori is able to move much more freely, increasing his attack tempo and pace dozens of times faster than earlier. Mori continues to flatline the executives, but his momentum stops when Q manages to get close to our hero and smack him with his club. Q tells his allies that they still have a chance, given that Mori's not that quick. But they soon find out that the only reason Mori's not moving as fast as he wants is because he's been hiding his Yoi inside his ear. Mori removes the magical staff from his ear, which causes the entire arena floor to cave in. A moment later, X manages to send one of his snakes to try and retrieve Yoi, and when he realizes how this staff looks familiar, X starts to quake in his boots, especially considering that Mori's been carrying it up till now. As for Mori, Q's previous attack rocked him, but as he puts it, he's not finished yet. X manages to grab Yoi and hands it over to Q. Meanwhile, Executive I gets all delusional and starts to think he can handle Mori alone. In the meantime, X is absolutely shocked when he realizes that Mori has been doing this balancing act this whole time, controlling Yoi's weight while fighting in the tournament, which he likens to writing with one's right hand while drawing a picture with their left hand. Executive I, on the other hand, won't listen to his more experienced colleagues, so he lunges at Mori like a moron, but he and a couple of other executives instantly get humbled when the sheer force from Mori punching his own palm sends a couple of them flying. Not too far away, Q notices that Mori isn't even fighting the executives. Our hero is just treating this like practice. Executive I thinks he can still handle Mori, so he turns into a giant. Well, this just makes it easier for Mori to break his leg in half with a single kick. From there, it's business as usual, as our hero proceeds to knock out all the other enemies coming towards his direction. Meanwhile, Q gets frustrated seeing their ranks being made to look like scrubs, so he rouses the other executives with a nice little speech reminding them of the horrors of the Great War. As Q puts it, they have to get their shit together or it's going to be like Ragnarok all over again. All the while, Mori notices that Q and X are different from the rest of the executives, given they're the only ones who have the strength to hold and carry his Yoi. X jumps in and does a quick speech of his own, telling all the other executives that the time has finally come for them to prove themselves and demonstrate the power of humans who have surpassed their limits. Q and X's combined call to action is enough for the other executives to mobilize and unleash the full extent of their borrowed powers. We see them summon their respective national treasures before attempting to gang up on Mori. In turn, Mori springs into action, commanding Yoi to expand so that he can use it as a bridge that helps him get out of the arena. It works too, as our hero steers clear of the executive's converted attack, but our hero almost gets caught by G's unbreakable silk technique. This is child's play for the Monkey King though, as he easily counters by adjusting Yoi's weight, causing it to topple over the stadium. Meanwhile, two of the top world government executives have just summoned their respective national treasures too. Specifically, Q has fully transformed into Hercules, while X has summoned his heavenly sword of gathering clouds, Kusanagi, and the serpent god Yamada no Orochi. The two then try to go for a joint attack that combines the bow of Hercules with Orochi's poison, while the rest of the executives pile on with their respective borrowed powers. Mori sees all of this, but instead of losing his cool, our hero keeps things in perspective and does his best to maintain control of his power. The executives' combined assault unsurprisingly wrecks the whole stadium. Back inside the lab, Ilpyo has gotten the upper hand in his duel with Dewi. He thinks he's won, but Dewi directs his attention to someone not too far away. When Ilpyo turns, he sees that Mori has transformed back into his old self, the fully formed version of Jin Mori. Now, just because Mori's more or less back to his old self doesn't mean he's going to just swing wildly. In fact, he's now more mindful of his limits than ever, which leads him to conclude that he has to make each and every one of his next moves efficient in order to conserve his stamina. Our hero remembers that his last transformation into his so-called Jin Mori mode during his battle with Jung only lasted 10 minutes, and he might need more time in the scuffle. It doesn't seem to be an issue though, as Mori soon frees himself from G's unbreakable silk and the national treasures the executives threw at him with ease. From a distance, another world government agent asks Executive D what kind of borrowed power Mori has, but their butts get kicked before D can answer. D braces himself for an epic beatdown but is relieved when Mori passes him over, since he's not even worth the trouble. And well, Mori just proceeds to effortlessly run through the rest of the world government agents blocking his path after that. All the while, Mori decimates the executives' ranks with pinpoint precision, making sure that he doesn't waste one bit of his energy in schooling these guys. D is absolutely mortified when he realizes that Mori's not even using any borrowed power. This is just pure uncut martial arts. At the same time, Executive E tries to ambush Mori with his stony fists. And just to show that our hero's on a different level now, he even takes it upon himself to weigh his options and choose which is the most cost-effective way to dunk on his opponents as he continues to make his way through the battlefield. Mori heeds Dewi's advice and sticks to the basics, slicing up his opponents with techniques like renewal slice, renewal karate chop, and renewal front kick. By now, it's dawned on our hero that he's able to adapt to the situation instead of wasting energy by overusing his skills. Executive F tries to get the jump on our hero with his playing cards, but Mori just catches them in midair before flatlining the fool. Not too far away, Mujin pretty much starts salivating at the mouth when he notices Mori's movements resemble Jin Taijin's techniques when he made the Six look like a bunch of useless scrubs years ago. As a matter of fact, Mujin admits that what he's seeing right now is one of the most beautiful sights he's witnessed. In the middle of the arena, Mori starts to enjoy the heat of battle and realizes that Dewi gave him this exact mission to help him further master his abilities. Nearby, Shiaochen steps up to Mujin and tells him to just keep watching Mori turn his underlings into cannon fodder with basic moves. On top of that, Shiaochen informs the president of the world that Mori now has complete control of his powers. She even provides this whole analogy about how Mori used to be like a race car driver riding a hoopty, but now our hero's like a driver inside a souped-up F1 race car with the most powerful engine there is. Back on the battlefield, Mori posterizes more of his executives. X manages to send Orochi to gobble up our hero, but the snake god gets torn apart when Mori performs a spinning kick inside its belly. Meanwhile, Shiaochen gets ready to throw hands with Mujin. He starts talking trash at the Nox Bishop, telling her she's not the warrior she used to be, especially after failing to receive her usual supply of bioenergy after the events of Ragnarok. Mujin even throws more shade at Shiaochen when he asks her what would happen if she used her so-called initial form in her current state. But as Shiaochen puts it, she doesn't even need to use her initial form to deal with a loser like him. Their confrontation is cut short when O suddenly bursts into the scene with his dragon and squares up against Shiaochen. O gives Shiaochen his own brand of smack talk when he tells her that she only survived their previous run because of Heite. O's dragon then tries to chomp down on Shiaochen, but she's able to subdue the beast's jaws with her bare hands. And while O gets to have a huge slice of humble pie when Shiaochen tells him that the only reason she's holding back is because she made a couple of promises to Dewi. One, that she's not going to kill anyone, and two, that she won't use her true power. But after hearing O acting like a hotshot in front of her, Shiaochen declares that she's going to break that second promise she made to the Jade Emperor. Not only that, but the former Nox Bishop makes it a point to tell O to put some respect on her name, reminding them of who she was before she became a Nox Bishop. As Shiaochen puts it, she has torn apart hundreds of dragons single-handedly when she was young. And if you didn't know it by now, this blonde bombshell went by another name in the past, Shiaochen the Dragon Slayer. In the end, Shiaochen blows a kiss in O's direction before teaching him a hard lesson in not messing with someone like her. As Shiaochen then grabs O's red dragon and tears its jaws with her bare hands in the most satisfyingly brutal way possible. O starts crying like a little wuss after watching his favorite pet get gored to death. He tries to get back at Shiaochen by sending another dragon to burn her with its fiery breath. This time, Shiaochen just grabs Heite and tells the little guy to do its thing. So Heite blows a simple little bubble, and it's more than enough to deflect the dragon's fire, sending it towards what remains of the stadium and further blowing apart the whole venue. Our story then goes to a flashback from 17 years ago showing just how Koichi became a part of the world government. It turns out that like most people, Mujin was able to dupe Koichi into believing that Mori, Dewi, and Mira were traitors to humanity. Koichi's not too much of a dummy though, so he went on to consult his fellow Team Japan member, Midori, about this as well. But Midori had also been fooled into thinking that our heroic trio did indeed betray the human race during the events of Ragnarok. The flashback ends with Koichi consulting Samuel, who Mujin also poached to be part of the world government's executive program, about this. Koichi expressed his doubts about Mujin's whole story about Mori, Dewi, and Mira. On the other hand, Samuel expressed his interest in joining the executives regardless if Mujin was telling the truth. He was mainly motivated by the idea that he and the rest of humanity have to get stronger in order to face the gods themselves. In the present, Mori has just destroyed Yamada no Orochi and now faces against X. X asks Mori if he really betrayed humanity 17 years ago, and our hero tells the truth. He did not. Mori then tells X that it was Mujin who betrayed them during the Great War. Hearing this makes X realize that he always knew the world president was a lying scumbag, but he wanted to believe that the story he crafted was true. In any case, a job's a job, so X sticks to his duties and goes for one final clash with Mori. They both bust out their respective versions of Kyoichi's own Kusanagi-style Ghost Slash. Things end in a flash, as X finds himself slashed up, commending Mori for using his trademark technique against him before he passes out. All of a sudden, Samuel, aka Q, rushes Mori and the two get into a heated battle. Mori manages to bob and weave through Q's rain of Herculean arrows before going for a counterattack, but Q beats him to the punch as he catches Mori with a powerful left overhand. The two warriors get into it at close range, while Peach is reminded of the time she saw the Monkey King fighting Satan back in the Great War. And, well, let's just say that at this point, Peach has started crushing on Mori, even though she does her best to hide how she really feels about the guy. Back on the battlefield, Q manages to rock Mori, while the rest of the executives cheer him on. To his credit, Q is actually the only world government agent who's been able to last more than a few seconds fighting Mori. However, even his fellow executives can see that Q's already sustained damage from this clash, while Mori remains unscathed. Still, Q continues to fight through his injuries as he throws punches at the Monkey King. Mori is able to sneak in a few well-placed open palm strikes on his left side, while he eats up Q's devastating punches. In the end, our hero stops targeting Q's body after gauging that his opponent has had enough. Impeccable timing too, because Q's body gives out on him after taking all those hits from Mori. Q explains how human ingenuity was able to rebuild his leg after Zeus crushed it during the Great War. Just before passing out, Q tells Mori to just wait, because humanity will surpass him sooner or later. In response, Mori tells his downed opponent that he's looking forward to seeing that day come. Mori then recalls his old clone Huey as he makes his way towards his primary target, Mujin. Shortly after, our hero comes face to face with the man, who tries to act cool by greeting our hero like they were friends. But Mori's not having any of Mujin's crap, so he gives him a solid right straight to the face before Mujin can even finish his sentence, a punch that's had his name on it for 17 years. Now, remember when Ilpyo said his mission in the north was a success even though we just saw Sujin rejecting him and some random nutjob trying to assassinate him? Well, we finally get more details about this when our story shows a flashback from this particular meeting. We see that the would-be assassin tries to swallow a poison capsule after he fails to take out Ilpyo. Ilpyo, on the other hand, prevents him from doing this, and we soon learn that the dude isn't part of Balhae, he's seemingly a member of neo-Nox. Ilpyo tries to spin it this way, telling Sujin that there's a rat within Balhae's ranks. But Sujin's no fool, so she tells Ilpyo how convenient it is that this rat appeared the same time a world government agent like him showed up in front of Balhae's doorstep. Sujin has her suspicions that Ilpyo set up this whole debacle, to which Ilpyo plants the idea in Sujin's head that Mira, Mandoc, and neo-Nox are planning on pitting the world government against Balhae. He even goes so far as to try and convince Sujin that he would have fallen for the assassination attempt if he truly was the mastermind behind it. That way things will look more convincing. Of course, Sujin has doubts about this, as she tells Ilpyo that maybe that's what he wants her to think all along. In any case, Ilpyo leaves Balhae's home base, leaving Sujin to wonder if Ilpyo's angling to have neo-Nox go to war with her own faction. Back in the west, Mandoc catches wind of this whole assassination attempt on Ilpyo and easily deduces that the Sly Fox is trying to get Balhae and neo-Nox to go to war against each other. Oh, and he categorically denies that the assassin is one of their own. Ultimately, Mandoc believes that there are layers to Ilpyo's grand plan, he just doesn't know it yet. So Mandoc concludes that maybe he should focus on Mujin for now. Mandoc's eyes then light up when he hears news that the Monkey King has emerged at the God of High School Tournament Stadium. In the present, Mujin tries to act tough and taunt Mori, who answers him with a solid kick to the face. The Monkey King then proceeds to pummel Mujin, and he only stops to ask him why he killed his grandpa, Jin Taijin. The long and short of it is that Taijin was just unfortunate collateral damage. You see, Mujin's primary target was exclusively Mori, but he also knew that Taijin would be a thorn in his side if he killed Mori and left the old man alive. So Taijin had to go. Mujin utters a fake apology for what he did, but Mori is having none of it. Our hero goes back to bringing the beatdown on the scumbag, all the while letting out the pent-up anger he's been holding onto for 17 years. A quick flashback shows P telling her boss that she'll distract Mori to give him time to escape, but Mujin insists on staying because he thinks he has some unfinished business to settle with Mori. Meanwhile, O and Shiaochen are having their own heated confrontation. O gets distracted for a moment when she turns to see Mori beating the living daylights out of Mujin, while our hero continues to berate his enemy for betraying him all those years ago. Mujin manages to catch one of Mori's fists mid-punch and asks him if he's done venting, but Mori demands an answer to why Mujin decided to screw them over in the first place. Somewhere else, Ilpyo and Dewi continue to duke it out. He's managed to subdue Dewi for the time being and tells him that Mujin's plan was to draw Mori out into the world all along. That's because Mujin is planning on branding Mori as a global public enemy, which in turn would help him remain as the world's supreme leader. Back at the stadium's ruins, the general public catch a glimpse of Mori and start panicking. Our hero, on the other hand, finally gets an answer when Mujin tells him that he betrayed them during Ragnarok because it was impossible for humans like him to live knowing there was something much stronger than them, referring to Mori and the gods. Chaos ensues on the streets, and Mujin uses this as justification for being the sole leader of humanity when he sends out his executives to help evacuate the panicking masses. He then brands Mori as an enemy of the human race before proceeding to attack our hero. Mujin manages to hit Mori with a precision throat strike before blocking one of his attacks and subduing the Monkey King with his powers. He continues going on a rant about how Mori's the real enemy here, while our hero notices that Mujin is using his powers to distort his attacks at the end of each strike. Mujin tries to trap Mori using his Longinus crucifixion technique, but our hero immediately frees himself and goes back to giving Mujin a facial readjustment. All the while, Mori chastises him for not just killing Taijin, but for basically selling out humanity to the gods by making them reliant on borrowed power. Mujin remembers his promise to Ultio and insists that he's not letting the gods use humanity. It's actually the opposite. They're the ones taking advantage of the gods by using borrowed power. The two then get into another heated clash, as each side brands the other as a traitor. In response to the accusations, Mujin even crosses the line and says that Dewi and Mira are to blame as well, since they sided with Nox. This whole sequence culminates with Mujin buying into his own crap and telling Mori that he's doing everything he does for the sake of the human race. From there, Mujin activates the quantum computer inside his Noah base, which turns on his Wi-Fi and allows him to channel all of the borrowed power he can get his hands on. The quantum computer is destroyed in the process. On top of that, Mujin's attack is cut short before he can even unleash it when Mori chops off his right arm with a well-placed renewal recoilless kick. We then learn that while all this drama is going down with Mujin and Mori, Dewi has been executing the other part of their plan. That is to say, he's the one who's just wrecked the world government's quantum computer. Mujin realizes he's about to bite the dust, as he recalls Ultio and the promise they made to each other in the past before going for one last gambit, distorting Mori's innards with his powers. Mori is able to withstand Mujin's attack and prepares to shatter his skull with a 12-6 elbow when the collective herd of the city's citizens start pelting him with their own low-grade borrowed powers. The mobs start berating Mujin, thinking that they can beat Mori. On the other hand, Mujin tells our hero to look at his wonderful work, because as Ilpyo had correctly predicted, the world president has now managed to fully sway public opinion, allowing them to band together against a common enemy, Mori. Back in the lab, we find out that Dewi managed to defeat Ilpyo before he destroyed the quantum computer. Ilpyo admits defeat and correctly surmises that Dewi purposefully didn't use the full extent of his abilities during their duel. After all, he didn't really want to take out his friend. However, Ilpyo knows that Dewi and Mori might have won the battle, but Mujin absolutely made sure that their reputations have been ruined during this whole debacle. However, Dewi lets Ilpyo know that they really don't give a crap about that. At the stadium's ruins, Mori flips Mujin off and reveals that he too doesn't give a single toss about what the sheeple of the world think of him, because he got what he needed, the arm that would help them activate the nano treatment machine for Ahan. Dewi informs Ilpyo about this too, while Mujin correctly surmises that Mori's doing all of this for his sister. He tries to use his silver tongue to hoodwink Mori into siding with him in exchange for Ahan's cure, but Mori is having none of Mujin's garbage anymore, so he replies to the offer by punching the sleazebag in the kisser. And just to prove he's not playing around, Mori tells Mujin to keep his sister's name out of his mouth. Meanwhile, the mob starts calling for Mori's head as if they can do anything about it, while Mujin continues to get under our hero's skin. He tells Mori that he's pretty much a moron for trying to save Peach's life, since their plan would have gone much smoother if Mori had just kept up with their ruse. To add to that, Mujin even criticizes Dewi for not having the stones to finish him off, especially considering he has more than enough power to destroy Mujin this whole time. All the while, the masses continue to try and butt into Mujin and Mori's conversation, and they get so annoying that even Mujin admits they're a nuisance. But Mujin is a consummate showman if nothing else, so he gives the people what they want and prepares to have a good old-fashioned showdown with Mori. He takes off his robe and immediately uses his gravitational powers to try and take out Mori and Peach. Mori sends Yoi to protect Peach, as Mujin attempts to crush him with the full force of his gravitational ability. Mujin eventually traps Mori, and Mujin reveals that Project Wi-Fi was originally intended to counter Dewi. But since Mori's more of a martial artist, subduing Mori and planting a gravitational bomb inside his makeshift prison is enough to take him out. Mujin goes on to say that this trick wouldn't have worked on someone like Dewi, but it's perfect for Mori, since he's not in his prime anymore. An explosion occurs from inside Mori's rocky prison. We then find out in the flashback that Mujin has been storing all this energy for 34 years for the sole purpose of busting it out on this very occasion. In the present, Mujin says that Jasan-Jun had the power to protect. Well, he's the exact opposite of that, because he believes he has the power to destroy his targets completely. Mujin then ups the ante and causes a huge explosion that threatens to engulf the entire block, because that's how you protect humanity. Shiaochen manages to save Peach from the blast with one of Heitei's bubbles, while Mori completely nullifies the explosion by expanding Yoi. This also allows him to escape Mujin's trap, as the magical staff becomes a gigantic pillar in the middle of the crater that was once the God of High School Tournament Stadium. Yoi threatens to topple over an entire column of buildings with people still in them, so Mori tries to reduce its size right after, but he realizes he's too gassed out to do this. Surprisingly enough, Mujin jumps in and they form a monetary alliance to prevent Yui from crushing the people in this trajectory. They manage to do it, and it's back to the regularly scheduled scuffle. Mujin and Mori get into another close-quarter clash, with the world president unleashing his inner xenophobe when he tells our hero to get the hell out of his country because he's too different from them. Mori gains the upper hand and rocks Mujin with a cracking punch, but the world president knows that he managed to mess with our hero's insides earlier, which explains why Mori hasn't been using his renewal techniques recently. But Mujin immediately eats his words when Mori suddenly busts out a renewal kick aimed right at his face. He's able to dodge this by using the recoil from his gravitational powers. However, there's layers to Mori's game, as he quickly transitions his renewal technique into a Brazilian kick that he copied from Dewi in the past. Mujin goes for the nuclear option knowing that this one kick is going to kill him. That is to say, he decides to take both of them out by activating his gravitational powers at point-blank range. On the other hand, Mori's ready to die tonight as long as he gets his revenge on Mujin. Mujin's gravitational ability kicks in, as a bright purple cross-shaped flash of light engulfs the area. However, the technique fails to kill both Mori and Mujin when Dean suddenly bursts onto the scene to separate the two combatants. Dean is as chipper as can be, as he turns to Mori and teases his so-called master. But Dean is not out of the proverbial woods yet, as he finds himself right at the center of Mujin's gravity attack. Dean takes the full brunt of the blast, while Mori momentarily sees his friend's appearance take on the form of Jin Taijin. We soon learn that this gravitational technique is called Mujin's Longinus Sacrificium. It does its thing and the dust soon settles. Mori thinks Dean just bit the dust, but he's surprised to see the boy is alive and well after catching the full force of Sacrificium. Mujin's just as shocked to see this, and it makes him realize that Dean is the guy he's been waiting for this whole time. But they still have business to attend to, so the two combatants prepare to go for another clash. Dean tries to stop Mori from continuing his duel with Mujin, but Mori has tunnel vision now. That's all he wants to do. He's glad that Dean's safe, but he tells his friend to stop talking to him. On the other hand, Dean knows that Mori and Mujin are going to end up dead if they continue tussling, and he doesn't want that to happen. Dean then reveals more details about his godfather. We find out that this guy happens to be none other than Giju Moon, aka Executive S. And if you didn't know it by now, the person who sent him to the hospital is Mira. Dean tells Mori that he knows he's not a bad guy even though he's friends with Mira. Our boy even tries to guilt-trip Mori by leveraging the solid save he made just now. In addition to that, Dean admits that he wants to protect Mujin too, since he realized that the world president isn't a complete dirtbag after seeing him help Mori save the citizens from getting toppled by Yui earlier. And if that's not enough to convince Mori, Dean informs him that he had a vision where he saw him and Mujin's brutal deaths. However, Mori has really become too single-minded at this point. Instead of backing down, he tells Dean to get as far away as possible so that he doesn't get caught in the crossfire. In response, Dean grabs Mori by the sleeve and drags him down the crater made from Mujin's Sacrificium technique. At the bottom, Dean tells Mori that this is the only way he can save him and Mujin. So he offers Mori a challenge. He can climb back up and get into it with Mujin again once he defeats Dean in single combat. Mori's not having any of it, but Dean insists. As he puts it, they never really finished their quarterfinals bout. And now, it's about time they start the last God of High School tournament battle. Back on the surface, Mujin still hasn't had enough of a beating, so he tells his executives he'll be dropping down below to go after Dean and Mori. But his loyal mob locks arms and block his path. Mujin's tune only changes when Pete tells him he really should get some rest, as he passes out right in the middle of the stadium's ruins after relegating his job to P. So P acts like the loyal employee that she is and starts taking charge the moment Mujin loses consciousness. She orders the world government agents to either help in evacuating the citizens or go on guard duty to protect Mujin. While this is happening, O and Shiaochen are still going at it hard above the skies of the city. In the bottom of the crater, Dean once more tries to urge Mori to calm down, but the Monkey King just gets livid. As a matter of fact, Mori's acting like a villain right now, since he won't stop to listen to reason even after Dean shows him a vision he saw using his borrowed power, one that shows Mori and tons of citizens losing their lives if he continues fighting Mujin. Again, Dean tries to plead the case that Mujin might not be a total scumbag, at least to him, especially considering that the world president was responsible for developing the nano treatment machine that helped him recover from his illness all those years ago. But all this falls on deaf ears, so Dean is forced to go toe-to-toe with his friend. A blink of the eye later, Dean is seen lying flat on the floor after Mori absolutely schooled him. Mori tells him to stay down. But there's no quitting for Dean. He gets back on his feet and tells Mori he can still tussle. At the same time, Dean comes up with a plan to beat Mori with quote-unquote composure. To put it simply, Dean knows that Mori's bound to make an error during their duel, given that the Monkey King has lost his temper. So Dean plans on capitalizing on that. It takes a whole lot of effort though, because Mori proceeds to give him a solid beatdown right away. Sure, Dean can see the future, but Mori's just a half a beat quicker with his moves, preventing Dean from defending against his friend's attacks, much less mounting a counter. But as Dean predicted, Mori soon exposes a hole in his defense. So Dean takes advantage of it to hit Mori with a physically impossible kick that makes his bend the opposite way like it's made of rubber. He misses as Mori goes for a counterattack. On the other hand, Dean decides to copy his moves, which then allows him to keep pace with Mori. Mori ups the ante when he starts performing the kick of the blue dragon technique. Dean does the same, which makes our hero realize that Dean's foresight ability allows him to copy his opponent's moves even before they perform them. The two clash with their respective kicks of the blue dragon, and Dean realizes at this point he probably messed up thinking he could beat Mori with composure alone. It also doesn't help that the Monkey King is about to bust out a more powerful move, the kick of the double dragons. Back on the surface, the mob gets antsy and attempt to force their way into the crater to get their hands on Mori. World government agents do their best to cordon off the area. In the meantime, E asks F if they should get down there too, and help Dean deal with Mori. But F tells him it's all good, Dean can handle the Monkey King. A flashback reveals that the world government agents haven't been watching Mori from their lab during the God of High School tournament. They were keeping an eye on Dean because they thought he was hiding a national treasure. In the present, F confirms that the liar he's been looking for all this time is none other than Dean, as we find out that he is actually hiding something, and it's way more powerful than your typical national treasure. Inside the crater, Mori's previous attack has left him gassed out, so he starts transforming back into his Mori Dan form. On the other hand, we get the big reveal that Dean actually possesses the Monkey King's armor suits, which he has just used to protect himself from Mori's kick of the double dragon's technique. Mori sees this, and we find the Monkey King is now reverted to his weaker human form. Still, Mori thinks that Dean activating the armor suits doesn't give him the edge, it just evens the playing field. So the two warriors rush each other again and get into another close quarter clash, and Dean soon reveals his game plan, to simply focus on offense using his borrowed power. It's super effective too, as this allows Dean to get past Mori's defenses and hit him with a renewal recoilless strike that sends the Monkey King flying. Dean continues explaining his game plan, telling Mori that his borrowed power combined with the armor suits give him an unfair advantage in this bout. Plus, Mori's now in his human form, so chances are slim he's going to beat Dean. So he urges his friend to stop fighting once more. On the other hand, a piece of rock hits Dean in the head, which allows Mori to deduce that his foresight ability isn't perfect. Dean admits this, telling himself he didn't notice Mori fling that pebble toward his head, since he was too focused on attacking him. We then get a flashback from a long time ago, back when Mori was still the Monkey King. One of his simian subjects suggests he get some armor for himself, and this is where we find out the origin story behind his armor suits. It turns out that the powerful artifact was created by the divine blacksmith, Hephaestus. It took some doing though, as Mori first rejected Hephaestus' request to look for the ultimate ingredient to craft an armor for him. Specifically, the blacksmith needed something much more durable than barbadium, something quote-unquote alive. Sometime later, Hephaestus' workshop is destroyed after some bald guy, referring to Okwang, screws her over. You see, Okwang actually commissioned Hephaestus to make a weapon for him too, which ultimately led to the creation of the Blade of Tathagata. Now, if you didn't know it already, the Blade of Tathagata was crafted from the souls of 48,000 lives that Okwang himself personally took. On the other hand, Hephaestus took it upon herself to create another artifact that would counter the Blade of Tathagata, which happened to be none other than the Monkey King's armor suits. Unlike the Blade of Tathagata, the armor suits weren't imbued with thousands of murdered souls. Instead, it only needed the single soul of a willing sacrifice. And it's here that we learn that Hephaestus herself was the one who gave up her life to complete the creation of the armor suits. In turn, this injected the artifact with divine powers. But it also had one caveat: Hephaestus' soul would be the judge of who's worthy of wearing the armor suits. We then learn that Hephaestus told Mori to hurl her into her workshop's furnace. Mori complies, and Hephaestus is honestly happy that this would allow her to become one with her greatest creation. She starts sinking into the molten metal of the furnace, all the while expressing her curiosity about whether Jahongda-sung himself would be worthy of wearing the armor suits. Surprisingly enough, she continues talking well after she fully sinks into the furnace, warning the Monkey King that the armor suits would leave him the moment he became unworthy of wearing them. The flashback then moves on to thousands of years later, at the moment when Mori absolutely wrecked Ahan's childhood home and took out her biological parents along with it. It was this exact instance that revoked Mori's armor suit privileges. That is to say, taking out innocent people like that, causing huge property damage, and turning a baby into a cripple instantly made Mori unworthy of wielding the armor suits. In the present, Mori starts going on a monologue about he pretty much lost his sense of identity after losing his armor suits. But all this led to our hero attempting his best to find purpose in life and prove that he is indeed worthy of wearing Hephaestus' greatest creation. Dean listens to all this and tells his friend how he understands him. With that out of the way, the two get back to business, as they rush each other once more and start trading blows. Dean accidentally hits the wall behind Mori, which gives our hero an idea for a distraction. So Mori kicks the same spot on the wall, which causes rocks to rain down on them from above. This allows Mori to divert Dean's attention enough, as our hero traps him in a technique called Samsu Foot Grip, a submission hold that pins down Dean on the ground, making him an easy target for the falling rocks. Not only that, but Mori also plans on dropping Yui right on top of Dean. But it's immediately revealed that this whole sequence is just another one of Dean's visions. In the present, the young warrior braces for Mori's leg lock, but he still gets caught. However, a twist comes when a glowing yellow cross similar to Mujin suddenly appears on Dean's left hand. He realizes he can use this against Mori and allow himself to steer clear of the falling rocks and Yui. So Dean blasts himself in the chest with the cross-shaped energy, which is strong enough to knock away Mori behind him. On the other hand, Mori realizes that Dean just came up with this genius move on the fly, knowing that the armor suits would protect him from the energy blast. However, our hero starts to get concerned when he realizes that Dean is now able to wield Mujin's borrowed power for some reason. Regardless, Mori gets back on his feet and clashes with Dean again. Mori grabs Dean in a classic Muay Thai clinch before hitting him with low kicks aimed at Dean's ankle. Meanwhile, some random influencers climb down from the surface to film their duel for some online clout. Somewhere else, Beck writes an equation on his board calculating the amount of damage Mori needs to damage Dean while he's wearing the armor suits. Back in the crater, Dean realizes that Mori's targeting his ankles because it's one of the few spots in his body that the armor suits don't cover. The Monkey King gains the upper hand when he summons Yui and uses it to drive Dean into the wall. Mori hammers down Dean with his magical staff until he's trapped deep within the wall. However, Dean is able to not only counter, but also break Mori's left arm in the process when he punches Yui from inside the wall. From there, Mori knows he can't control his powerful staff anymore, as Dean jumps out of the hole in the wall and activates the Dragon Armor Suit's Power Boost mode buff to give Mori a solid beatdown. Mori only survives the clash after using all his remaining energy to transform back into his Jin Mori form, although he notes that he can only keep this up for a minute. On the other hand, Dean raises the stakes when he also activates his Dragon Armor Suit's Speed Boost mode ability. Dean manages to edge out Mori during their next clash, but the Monkey King still won't give up. He gets distracted for a second when he notices Yui has suddenly disappeared, which then allows Mori to pepper him with more low kicks to the ankle. Dean tells him his attacks are doing nothing, but the boy immediately gets humbled when his ankle is blown out after all the hits it received. Mori then chooses this opportunity to teach Dean about the weaknesses of Renewal Taekwondo. First, this martial arts style expends a lot of energy, which is why Dean easily gets tired after performing its techniques. 2. Renewal Taekwondo exclusively focuses on striking the enemy's weak points, which Mori has been doing to Dean on top of targeting his ankles this whole time. All this led to Dean putting too much pressure on his ankles, leaving him incapacitated. Mori then praises Dean's potential but tells the boy that he's missing one important quality when it comes to Renewal Taekwondo: experience. As Mori puts it, technique always trumps pure strength alone, and since Dean is basically a beginner in Renewal Taekwondo, there's just no way he can beat a master like Mori. Back in Beck's lab, he calculates the likelihood Mori will win against Dean. Meanwhile, another mob made up of people carrying improvised weapons forms in the middle of the city and starts marching towards Mujin's location. In the crater, Dean and Mori clash again, as the Monkey King reveals the third weakness of Renewal Taekwondo, that it's weak in close quarters combat. Mori is able to gain the upper hand during this clash, but he knows he'll turn back to his human form sooner than later, so he rushes to finish off Dean as quickly as possible. Dean feels himself getting overwhelmed by Mori's merciless ankle kicks, so much so that he starts to have a flashback about the time the armor suits first came to him. On top of that, Dean remembers his main goal, to help his godfather, Giju, get the treatment he needs. This gives Dean a second wind, as he lunges at Mori. Mori targets his ankles again, but this time Dean copies E's borrowed power and covers his right leg in stone. Dean then drives back Mori with Mujin's borrowed power before trapping him using one of Kyoichi's own techniques. Dean finds an opening and gives Mori a solid uppercut, while Mori wonders what the hell Dean is, given that the boy doesn't just have the ability to copy borrowed powers, but the armor suits chose him too. We learn about this soon enough, as Mujin goes on an exposition dump somewhere in the city. We learn that the taboo seal that Ultio removed during the events of the Great War effectively lifted the restrictions preventing humans from accessing the god's powers on a cellular level. However, there are still trace amounts of this seal in the human DNA. Mujin goes on to explain that these trace amounts can eventually be erased within a couple of generations. The long and short of it is that the borrowed power users who have started making babies after the Great War have heralded a second generation of humans that don't possess the taboo seal in their DNA anymore. Mujin thinks that this will eventually lead to the rise of a new kind of human, ones that even the gods are afraid of. Listening to Mujin's monologue allows P to deduce that the real purpose of the God of High School tournament was to hunt down Jin Mori and find those new breeds of humans so that Mujin can poach them to work for him. All that said, Dean happens to belong to this new generation of humans, a race that Mujin cornily dubs as Generation X. Back in the crater, Mori reverts to his human form while Dean continues to barrage him with strikes. Dean gains the upper hand and subdues Mori with Mujin's Longinus technique before hitting him with Renewal Earth Strike. On the other hand, Mori can't help but be in awe of Dean's skills. But like he said earlier, the boy still lacks experience, which explains why his form is still sloppy. Mori takes this moment to deduce that his own Renewal Taekwondo stances are subpar, given that Dean just copied his own moves. All this boils down to Mori realizing that he has to further emulate Taijin's movements to master renewal Taekwondo. Mori mounts a counterattack, and Dean sees a vision of his butt getting kicked. By the time Mori finishes his salvo, our hero comes to the conclusion that renewal Taekwondo's recoilless techniques aren't really, well, techniques. They're more like buffs that you add to the various skills within the renewal Taekwondo handbook. All in all, achieving this means you've mastered the martial art. From there, Mori gains a second win and starts hitting Dean with recoilless renewal moves that our hero's opponent can barely keep up with. Dean is unable to copy any of it too, since he hasn't fully grasped how to apply the recoilless buff to the renewal Taekwondo moves he copies from Mori. At this point, Dean is unable to answer any of Mori's strikes, with the dragon suits going into autopilot mode the only reason the boy is able to withstand our hero's barrage. All the while, Mori begins to realize that he's not just able to reach Taijin's level during this bout, he has surpassed his grandpa. Mori continues to assault Dean with more recoilless renewal Taekwondo moves. Back on the surface, Mujin watches a live feed of the duel from his phone and gets livid when he sees Mori getting stronger. Back then reveals that Mori has basically compensated for his lack of raw power by becoming the ultimate skill master. Back in the middle of the city, the armed mob from earlier arrives and starts attacking the other mob loyal to Mujin. It turns out that this new group of random citizens are made up of non-borrowed power users who have grown tired of the world government's unfair laws and statutes. A riot erupts on the surface, while Mori and Dean continue to throw hands. Eventually, Dean finds himself in a pickle when Mori's unrelenting assault rips off his armor suits and leaves Dean topless. Mori sees this and attempts to finish off his opponent. Dean uses his borrowed power to look into the future and mount a counterattack. The two warriors clash, and Mori comes out on top, as the Monkey King informs Dean how he may not have the ability to look into the future, but his experience grants him his own version of foresight. From there, Mori recalls the lessons that both Taijin and Dewi told him in the past, applying them while he continues to pile on attack after attack against Dean. Meanwhile, we get caught up with Shiaochen and O's battle above the skies of the city. O is nearly put to sleep with a cracking punch from the former Nox Bishop. In turn, he summons Dragon Slayer Changsik's children, a horde of half-dragon, half-human hybrids under his command. The creatures immediately go after Shiaochen, and O makes sure he gets the upper hand by using his polymorph ability to simultaneously transform Changsik's children into full-grown dragons. Still, this isn't enough to bring down Shiaochen. All she does is activate 30% of her primeval borrowed power before eradicating the dragons and knocking out O with a single punch. In the crater, Dean is ostensibly gassed out but declares he's not going to give up, because he has so much to learn from Mori. And while Mori's finally calmed the hell down at this point, as he welcomes another clash with Dean, our hero even starts enjoying this whole experience. Mori and Dean square up, as Dean recalls how he made a vow to make the most of every single moment in his life after being cured of his disease. Our two warriors get caught up in the heat of battle, as they lunge at each other. Meanwhile, the riot between the borrowed power users and non-borrowed power users continues to rage in the middle of the city. Mori and Dean's final confrontation ends with the two warriors punching each other in the face. Not long after that, world government agents and executives stationed to guard the cross-shaped hole in the ground witness Mori carrying Dean up to the surface. The executives, particularly Q, spot Mori and waste no time to ambush him before he can get back on his feet. Mori's almost hit by one of Q's arrows, but Dean manages to save our hero by transferring ownership of the armor suits back to him. This successfully protects Mori from the rain of projectiles coming his way. In turn, Mujin tells his men to stand down knowing that they can't damage Mori while he has the armor suits on. Meanwhile, Mori thanks Dean for lending him the armor suits, but Dean insists Mori to keep it. On top of that, we learn from Dean that the armor itself had told him how much it wanted to return to its original owner. In any case, Mori and Dean are back on good terms, as the two agree to help each other further develop their martial arts. Conveniently enough, we find out that the influencer who started filming their bout in the crater earlier is actually an MC for the God of High School tournament. Even more convenient is when we find out that the tournament had still been going on up until this point, as the MC declares Mori the overall champion of the event for some reason. Somewhere else, we learn that Dewi has come face to face with his ex, Mira. In a flashback, we find out that Ilpyo also revealed more details behind Syndrome X to Dewi after their duel. As Ilpyo puts it, Syndrome X is a manifestation of the recessive genes that die out when these so-called new humans are born into the world. Simply put, they're like rejects of Generation X. What's more concerning, though, is when Ilpyo informs Dewi that Mujin accounted for all of this. In fact, the world president established the God of High School tournament as a way to add this new race of humans to his payroll. But the conspiracy goes deeper than that. As Ilpyo reveals, even the world government's laws are specifically designed for Mujin's weird eugenics. That is to say, he made it so that borrowed powers would exclusively breed with one another, which in turn would speed up the evolution of humanity to Generation X. Ultimately, Mujin basically wants humanity to become the master race. Meanwhile, Mandoc rushes toward the middle of the city while giving us a thankfully brief refresher of what led him here. The long and short of it is that he knows Ilpyo is planning on pitting Neo Nox against Balhae. More than that, Mandoc is able to deduce Ilpyo's ultimate goal, to stop Mujin's world government forces from getting stronger by sicking Mandoc on him. Ilpyo did this when he framed Neo-Nox with that whole assassination attempt at Balhae. In the present, Mandoc knows he's basically doing what Ilpyo wanted all along by attacking Mujin at the heart of the city, but Mandoc is also well aware that Ilpyo's missing something very important in this grand scheme of his, so he's already going along with it for now. Meanwhile, Ilpyo tells Dewi that Mandoc is probably on his way to the city to start a fight with Mujin and his forces. Dewi finally catches on to Ilpyo's ultimate goal, to orchestrate events that would lead to a devastating hit towards Mujin's approval ratings. As Ilpyo puts it, he accounted for everything in this plan except for the sudden emergence of Mori. Thanks to him, Mujin was given an excuse to seize more control of the government, while Mandoc saw this as an opportunity to expand Neo-Nox's power. Once again, Ilpyo repeats that Dewi and Mori might have successfully saved Ahan's life, but they've been soundly defeated when it comes to the realm of politics. Regardless, Dewi and Ilpyo become friends again. In the present, Dewi and Mira come face to face. The Witch of the West immediately attacks Dewi when he says hi to her. Not too far away, Mujin gives out the order to subdue the rioting non-borrowed power users. The executives roughen up the mob and eventually arrest them. All of a sudden, Mandoc and his Neo-Nox soldiers jump into the scene and start taking out world government agents. At the same time, Dewi and Mira's duel is cut short when Shiaochen arrives. The duo face off against Mira and her Neo-Nox forces, and a few moments later, Mori arrives on the scene as well. Weirdly enough, they see that there are a couple of Moris in front of them. Mandoc thinks one of them is a clone, but Jung confirms otherwise. Mandoc wastes no time to start some smoke with Mori and ambushes our hero. Mori activates his armor suits, while the other Mori deflects Mandoc's gigantic swords. Jung watches from the sidelines and notices how Mori has improved since the last time they met. On the other hand, executives like O and X just watch this happen from a safe distance, knowing that they don't want a single piece of that action. Mandoc, on the other hand, makes the right call when he chooses to analyze his opponent instead of jumping into the fray blindly once more. Mandoc can't tell if he's falling for a trap, considering that Mori isn't the relatively weak warrior he saw during the earlier parts of the God of High School tournament. From a distance, Ilpyo emerges from the rubble and notices Mandoc isn't making a move against Mori. He correctly surmises that the Neo-Nox bishop is still gauging Mori's power levels. In the end, Ilpyo concludes that this might be good news for him and his allies given that Mori can be their own wildcard. Ilpyo then steps up to Mandoc and tells him to just walk away while he can. To convince the guy, Ilpyo starts bluffing his way through the conversation by telling Mandoc that Sujin and Balhae probably have him and Neo-Nox in their crosshairs. Mandoc analyzes all the information he's gathered up until now and correctly deduces that he just led him and his forces to a trap. Ilpyo knows that Mandoc is going to fold soon enough, especially knowing that they have Mori on their side. Nearby, Mori outright orders Jung to leave Mandoc's side and join them instead. Of course, being the edgelord that he is, Jung refuses and lashes out at Mori, ranting about how he doesn't have the right to tell him what to do. Jung tries to start some static with Mori and summons Gyeondaewon. In response, Mori repeats his order and intimidates the opposing forces by summoning Yoi. Our hero also tries to get Mira to leave Neo-Nox, but she's too brainwashed to do anything other than draw her sword in an attempt to start a clash between their factions. In the end, Mandoc tells his forces, including Mira, to stand down and retreat after weighing all his options. Neo-Nox teleports out of there with Jung. We learn that the other Mori is none other than Peach, who used her borrowed power to impersonate our hero in order to trick Mandoc. He then turns to Dean and thanks him for saving Peach earlier. More good news comes when Dewi uses his powers to regrow Peach's arm. Our heroes have a nice and short reunion, and Peach even turns red after Mori hugs her. But they still have one big problem to deal with: Mujin and the world government. Mujin and his forces have a standoff against Mori and his allies, while our hero spots all the non-borrowed power users that the world government has arrested. From there, Mori tells Mujin that he's been looking for a way to understand why he did all the scummy things he did in the past. Mori comes to the conclusion that Mujin had no other choice but to pull off his underhanded tactics for the greater good. Our hero ultimately forgives Mujin for murdering Taijin and betraying them back in the Great War. Make no mistake though, this confrontation doesn't end with everyone high-fiving one another. Instead, Mori straight up declares war against Mujin and the world government. Not only that, but our hero lays claim to the city block where the God of High School tournament stadium once stood, basically turning it into his own sovereign territory. Mori then tells Mujin he's going to set this world that's been twisted since Ragnarok straight again, to which Mujin asks if he has the power to do that. Dewi intervenes and says that they can make it work as long as he, Mori, and the rest of their allies work together. Oh, and Dewi sort of cedes supreme authority to Mori too, declaring him as their faction's leader. From there, Mori calls out to anyone around who's tired of Mujin and the world government's antics, telling them to join his side instead. The war between the world government and the Monkey King's united army is formally declared. In turn, Dean decides to side with the world government, since he supports Mujin's politics. Mori respects his decision but reminds his friend that they'll be enemies from now on. All of a sudden, an entire platoon of world government agents arrive from their headquarters to serve as reinforcements for Mujin and the executives. Mujin gives out the order to execute all their enemies, and a skirmish immediately ensues. Mori runs through several executives until he reaches Ilpyo and gets into a tussle with his surrogate big brother. But Dewi does his best friend a solid by picking up the slack and volunteering to throw down with Ilpyo. It's then revealed that Ilpyo and Dewi came to an agreement in the aftermath of their last duel. Specifically, Ilpyo and Dewi have agreed to expose Mujin's atrocities and ultimately make the people of the world turn their back on him. Long story short, Ilpyo will continue to sabotage Mujin's world government from the inside, while Dewi and his allies keep on messing with him from the outside. In the present, the narrator tries to ignite some drama by making us think that Dewi and Mori have their work cut out for them. Given that the two warriors are already gassed out from the battles they had to go through prior to this skirmish with the world government. But it's all just a red herring, as we soon learn after a few pages of exposition that Mori, Dewi, and the so-called Monkey King's United Army won the pitched battle. The non-borrowed power users cheer for their victory. Sometime later, the narrator explains that non-borrowed power users have since moved to the area that Mori claimed in the middle of the city. This sovereign territory has since been dubbed as DDM, although Yongji Park doesn't bother to explain what those initials stand for at that moment. We get more exposition as usual, where we get another couple blatant examples of the author making stuff up as God of High School goes along. Namely that the God of High School Tournament Finals champion is now Dean instead of Mori, even after the story just declared Mori as the champ a couple of chapters ago. Also, Dean's from England now, not Ireland. Aside from that, we see that Dean has become a trainee in the World Government Executive Program. Meanwhile, a reporter starts making the rounds on the streets. She asks people who they think really won the God of High School tournament, and they all agree that Mori deserves the crown. Somewhere in the west, deep within Neo-Nox's lair, Mira starts having a seizure while in the middle of sleeping. Her kid comforts her, and it gets super weird when you realize that he's actually telling his mom the same words Dewi told her back during the Great War, that he promises he's not going to die. Mira calms down and goes back to sleep, and the kid bids her goodnight. He then enters the other room where Mandok is having a violent nervous breakdown after all the drama that went down in the middle of the city. Mandok then asks the boy where Dewi is, and the kid answers by flipping him off. Mandok slaps the snot out of the brat and tells him to put some respect on his name. But Mira's kid is an absolute unit. He gives Mandok the middle finger once more before running out of the room. Our story then goes on another exposition dump, this time getting us up to speed with the updated status quo of the God of High School universe after the so-called First War of Independence between the world government and the Monkey King's United Army. We already know that Mori and Dewi won that battle, but what we didn't know up until now is that Dean became the first ever official member of the world government who happens to be a part of Generation X. More interestingly, the First War of Independence didn't start and end during the pitched battle in the middle of the God of High School Tournament Stadium's ruins. It's revealed that the world government forces retreated after that, which then allowed Mori's united army to push ahead and eventually conquer most of Seoul. Still, the world government holds the majority of the territories in the world. Although there are now 5 legitimate superpowers across the globe, namely Mujin's world government, Sujin's Balhae to the north, Mira's Neo-Nox to the west, Dewi and Nox to the east, and Mori at the heart of the South Korean capital. The good news is that Dewi and Mori are working together, which means there might be 5 global superpowers, but still just 4 factions in all. The narrator goes on to explain that Mujin's plan of using Mori as a figurehead that the rest of the world can rally against has worked splendidly. In the aftermath of the War of Independence, the world government received more support than ever from citizens all across the globe. On top of that, the executive program experienced a huge boom, as more and more borrowed power users decided to apply. In the present, Ilpyo reports that the world government has received an influx of aspiring executives totaling 12,000. But Mujin's only interested in one thing, Generation X. So Ilpyo tells them that they've confirmed 4 of the 12,000 executive applicants belong to Generation X. From there, Ilpyo lays out a plan on how they can defeat Dewi. According to him, all they have to do is tire him out with long-range attacks before finishing him off with close-quarter combat specialists. That's because Ilpyo knows that Dewi's only weakness is his stamina, since each of his techniques require a huge amount of effort to pull off. Mujin listens to all this and more or less leaves Ilpyo to handle everything else, because right now he's more interested in asking Ilpyo why he joined the world government in the first place. Ilpyo tells him that it's because he thought Dewi and Mori have no idea how to run a government. All they know is justice, and you can't rule the world with that alone. Ilpyo tries to suck up to Mujin by telling him that the system he established with the world government gets things right. Mujin then dismisses Ilpyo after hearing all this. With only himself and P inside the room, P tells Mujin that they can't trust Ilpyo. But the world president changes the subject and instead checks in on P's new arm, because it's revealed that she had it fixed after receiving wounds in the War of Independence. All in all, P's alright. It's just that she needs a certain device that's been implemented in her bones to keep living like she used to. Mujin feels bad about this, but P reassures him that she'll always be loyal to him. Shortly after, Ilpyo walks the world government headquarters hallway with his #1 fan, Executive 1. One reports that their recent run-in with Mori and Dewi's forces led to 352 casualties. Curiously, none of their forces died. They were all just put in the hospital. Ilpyo can't help but let out a smirk when he hears this, remembering when Dewi explicitly told him that he doesn't want anyone other than Mujin to die at his hands. Afterwards, he tells One that he really doesn't stand a chance against Dewi. But being the legit fanboy that he is, of course One brown-noses Ilpyo and tells his superior that the only reason no one died during the previous clash with Dewi and Mori's forces was because of Ilpyo's efforts. Somewhere else, inside Dewi's office, Shiaochen gives her boss a report about an upcoming protest that world government supporters are holding near DDM, the territory in Seoul that he and Mori have captured. Shiaochen surmises that the world government spies will probably infiltrate this protest to stir up some trouble, so she advises Dewi to steer clear of the area. In reply, Dewi expresses how much of a hassle it is to expand your territory, given that it just gives birth to more resistance. Plus, after reminding himself of Ilpyo's plan to sway public opinion against Mujin, Dewi finally realizes what his friend meant when he said he and Mori lost as far as the political side of this war is concerned. But Dewi ultimately brushes it off and asks Shiaochen where Mori is right now. We soon learn that Mori's at the medical bay with Peach waiting for an update on Ahan's status. Even better, we find out that the one and only Beck has decided to help Ahan with her treatment. Beck steps into the hallway, and we get a quick flashback that he showed up to offer his help the moment Dewi and Mori got Mujin's right arm. He then points Mori to Ahan's room, where our hero finally sees that his adoptive sister's condition is now stabilized thanks to the nanomachine treatment. Mori and Ahan have a tearful reunion. As always, Ahan's kind of mopey, as she asks Mori if she's been a burden to him. But Mori reassures his little sister that she's not. Oh, and our hero even got a new haircut resembling Ahan's short hair. The two siblings hug as Dewi steps into the room and smiles after seeing his best friend accomplish his mission to save Ahan's life. Several months later, we see that Ahan is fully recovered. She's even grown her hair to shoulder length once again, as Ahan stands in the middle of a field while someone off camera calls for her name. And that, guys, is the second part of God of High School's final season, aka the World Tournament arc. We really appreciate you staying with us until the end and hope you loved watching this video as much as we did making it. Got any thoughts, theories, or suggestions? Feel free to drop a comment below and let's talk about it. As always, please don't forget to give this video a like, share, and subscribe to our channel with that notification bell dinged for more. And why not check out the next one while you're at it? We're sure you're going to love it too. We'll see you real soon, guys. Stay safe out there.